Beneath the drifting mists and along the forgotten trails of China lie landscapes so surreal, so steeped in history, myth, and natural wonder, that they defy belief. From cloud-kissed twin peaks and bamboo-veiled ridgelines to snow-capped ranges bordering deserts and tropical cliffs that plunge into emerald seas, these places are more than just mountains. They are living realms of ancient pilgrimage, spiritual reflection, and untouched ecological marvels. In this journey, we venture beyond the famous icons and deep into the heart of China's most unreal and hidden mountainous realms. But before we continue, subscribe to the channel and like the video. Mount Lishan, rises gently from the fertile plains near Lebanon, in the historical heart of Shaanxi province, casting its wooded silhouette over one of the most storied landscapes in all of China. Despite its relatively modest elevation compared to some of China's more towering peaks, Lishan is wrapped in a shroud of historical and mythological significance, a place where the past breathes through the mist-draped forest trails, and where the weight of empires once pressed upon its ridges. Lishan's greatest claim to fame is its close proximity to one of the most important archaeological discoveries of the 20th century, the Terracotta Army. These life-sized clay soldiers, arrayed in formation beneath the earth, guard the mausoleum of China's first emperor, Qin Shi Huang. Mount Li stands sentinel over this ancient resting place, and according to legends, it was chosen as the burial site because of its auspicious geomantic qualities. Its slopes and surrounding terrain were said to conform to feng shui principles of heavenly harmony. In fact, ancient texts like the records of the Grand Historian mention Mount Li directly, noting that its metal and jade were significant. Symbolic language reflecting both the natural mineral wealth of the region and its spiritual resonance in the cosmology of imperial rule. The mountain itself is not just a backdrop to history but was deeply woven into the events of various dynasties. Emperors from the Western Zhou to the Tang sought its cool slopes for retreat and reflection. During the Tang dynasty, in particular, it was a favored escape from the intense summer heat of the capital at Chang'an, modern-day Lebanon. Elaborate palace complexes, now lost to time, once dotted the base of the mountain. The Huaqing hot springs, located at the foot of Lishan, were developed into grand bathing facilities by Emperor Xuanzong, who frequented them with his beloved consort, Yang Guifei, their romance still echoing in Chinese poetry and drama. These springs, heated by geothermal activity beneath the mountain, have bubbled for over a millennium and are still active today. Their waters were believed to have medicinal properties, able to cleanse the body and restore youthful vitality. A historical monument now marks the location of the imperial bathing pool, and stone inscriptions recall the leisure and luxury of Tang court life. Yet the mountain has also been a site of political tension. It was here, in 1936, that the famous Lebanon incident occurred, when General Zhang Wuliang detained Chiang Kai-shek to force a united front between nationalist and communist forces against the invading Japanese. A pivotal moment in modern Chinese history that took place on these same storied slopes. Beyond its human stories, Lishan's natural landscape unfolds in quiet majesty. Its ridges are cloaked in dense forest, primarily composed of Chinese pine, oak, and cedar, offering a tranquil refuge for birdlife and small mammals. In spring, wildflowers burst into color, carpeting the hillsides with vibrant blues and purples, while autumn transforms the canopy into a cascade of gold and rust. A web of walking paths winds through the woods, leading to lookout points where sweeping views of the Wei River Valley open up. Like painted scrolls beneath the sky, temples dot the mountainside, their tiled roofs peeking through the forest like relics from a dream. The most famous among them is the Laojun Palace, named for Laozi, the semi-mythical founder of Taoism, who is said to have meditated in the caves on the mountain. The site blends quietly into the landscape, built from wood and stone that seem aged into the terrain, and it exudes a calm dignity, much like the philosophy it represents, the pursuit of harmony with nature and the Tao. Incense wafts from the altars, mingling with the mountain air, and prayer flags flutter lightly in the breeze. Today, Mount Li is both a tourist destination and a place of local pilgrimage, especially during traditional festivals. Visitors ascend via cable cars or hiking trails, exploring both the mountain's scenic routes and its deep historical layers. Information plaques and guided tours now contextualize the sacred and political relevance of each site, and yet, in the stillness between footfalls and the echo of cicadas in the trees, one can still feel the mountain's ancient presence, a witness to emperors, revolutions, poets, and priests. The juxtaposition of geological calm and historical turmoil makes Lishan one of China's most unreal yet tangible places, a bridge between dynasties and decades, myth and modernity, stone and memory. It is a place where you do not simply look at the past. You walk through it, step by step, breath by breath, along pine-scented paths where the whisper of history seems to linger in the branches. Mount Miaofeng, or Miaofengshan, rises with quiet solemnity from the western outskirts of Beijing, forming part of the Taihang mountain range that frames the capital's sprawling urban basin. Despite being just 55 kilometers from the bustling city center, it is a world apart, a landscape shaped not by steel and glass, but by mist-draped ridgelines, weather-worn granite, and the steady pulse of religious devotion that has echoed for centuries. Revered as a sacred Taoist site and long honored in the syncretic fold of Chinese folk religion, Miaofengshan is one of the most spiritual places in the Beijing region, its slopes threaded with ancient pilgrimage routes and temple sanctuaries. The name Miaofeng means mysterious peak, and fittingly, the mountain has long been regarded as a place where the mundane world gives way to the mystical. The elevation is modest, its highest point is about 1,300 meters above sea level, but what it lacks in height, it more than makes up for in cultural depth. For over 1,000 years, pilgrims have journeyed here, particularly during the fourth month of the lunar calendar, to pay homage to the goddess Bixia Yuanjun, the heavenly jade maiden of the morning clouds, who is said to offer blessings of fertility, protection, and favorable weather. The pilgrimage tradition, especially vibrant during the Ming and Qing dynasties, was not simply an isolated act of personal faith. It was a collective experience, part religious rite and part social event, involving entire communities. Pilgrims walked from villages all across the North China Plain, forming long processions with banners, drums, and musical troops. These journeys could take weeks, and by the time they reached the base of Miaofengshan, the atmosphere was more like a traveling festival. Street-side inns, food stalls, puppet shows, and incense vendors lined the paths during peak pilgrimage season. The last stretch was always on foot, a strenuous but symbolic ascent up the mountain's winding stone trails, culminating in prayer at the summit temples. Central to this journey is the pilgrimage trail, a route that winds through forests of pine and cypress, past gorges and boulders smoothed by centuries of foot traffic. Along the way, small shrines are tucked into crevices and overhangs, each with its own story, deity, or protective function. Some pilgrims would stop to pray at every one, others would simply touch the worn stone for luck. In many places, red ribbons, tied by devotees, flutter from branches or railings, a bright tapestry of wishes and thanks left for the spirits of the mountain. At the top lies the goddess temple, the spiritual heart of Miaofengshan. It is not an ostentatious structure, rather, it blends seamlessly into the craggy terrain, with roofs that mimic the slope of the mountains and walls colored by time and lichen. Here, Bixia Yuanjun is honored with incense, offerings, and quiet chants. The scent of sandalwood fills the air, and bells ring gently in the wind. Visitors come to kneel, light candles, and murmur prayers for safe births, cured illnesses, or peace in the family. Despite the crowds during festivals, the temple retains a hushed solemnity, a sense that something deeper dwells within these ancient stones. Miaofengshan is also a stronghold of Taoist geomancy and feng shui thought. The mountain's position, flanked by neighboring ridges and facing distant valleys, is believed to channel energy in powerful, balanced ways. Taoist monks and hermits once made their homes in its caves and huts, seeking harmony with the Tao through meditation, calligraphy, and internal alchemy. Some of these shelters remain visible today, their entrances marked by inscriptions or crumbling lintels. It is said that during the late Qing period, high-ranking officials and even members of the imperial court would secretly consult with the mountain's Taoist sages on matters of health and destiny. In addition to its religious and cultural legacy, Miaofengshan is a haven for nature lovers. The biodiversity here is impressive given its proximity to one of the world's largest cities. In spring, cherry blossoms and magnolias scatter across the trails, while summer brings dense green canopies that shade the mountain paths and echo with bird calls. The air is cooler and cleaner than the city below, and wild herbs, long harvested for traditional medicine, grow in abundance. Autumn transforms the landscape into a kaleidoscope of amber, scarlet, and gold, making it one of Beijing's top hidden spots for leaf viewing. Even in winter, when snow dusts the temples and outlines the calligraphy carved into rock faces, Miaofengshan maintains a stark, austere beauty. Modern infrastructure has made the mountain more accessible, but it has not stripped it of its mystery. Today, buses and cars bring weekend hikers, curious tourists, and practicing Taoists alike, yet the pilgrimage spirit lingers. Many still choose to walk the entire trail, not out of necessity, but reverence. Cultural preservation efforts have protected the key temple complexes and restored weather-damaged statues, while carefully avoiding overt commercialization. The mountain is now part of the Western Hills Forest Park, but even under the label of scenic area, it retains its sacred aura. What makes Miaofengshan so surreal is not just its physical form or mythic past, but the coexistence of time-bound and timeless, the way skyscrapers and subways are only an hour away, yet feel like a different world altogether. Here, the air is perfumed with incense and pine, the stone paths echo with generations of footsteps, and every gust of wind seems to whisper fragments of forgotten chants. Whether one visits for spiritual connection, cultural heritage, or simple scenic beauty, Miaofengshan offers a profound journey inward, one that transcends eras and ideologies. It is a place not just to look at, but to feel. A living testament to the resilience of belief, the harmony of nature and spirit, and the quiet magic that can still be found on the thresholds of the modern world. Mount Qilian, or Qilianshan, forms one of the most awe-inspiring and surreal natural boundaries in all of China, a vast and majestic barrier where the arid deserts of the north give way to the cold, wind-scoured heights of the Tibetan Plateau. Stretching across the borders of Gansu and Qinghai provinces like a sleeping dragon of stone and snow, the Qilian Range is not just a geographic division, but a spiritual and ecological frontier, long considered a sacred threshold by nomads, monks, and emperors alike. Unlike the solitary peaks that dot southern China, the Qilian Mountains unfold as an immense, linear system of snow-capped ridges and icy summits, their serrated silhouettes visible for dozens of kilometers across the bleak, ochre-toned landscapes of the Hushi Corridor. This corridor, an essential artery of the ancient Silk Road, has funneled traders, warriors, and pilgrims between Central Asia and China for over 2,000 years. And always, the Qilian Mountains stood on the horizon, looming like a frozen wall between civilizations. The Qilian Range runs for more than 800 kilometers, with numerous sub-peaks exceeding 5,000 meters in elevation. Their highest point is Tuanjia Peak, which soars to approximately 5,547 meters, its summit perpetually cloaked in glacial ice and whipped by fierce winds. These summits are among the least disturbed in China, due largely to their remoteness and harsh climate. Glacier, dozens of them, flow down from the upper slopes into alpine valleys, feeding rivers that eventually sustain the oases scattered throughout the Gansu deserts. The very survival of ancient cities like Dunhuang and Zhangye historically depended on these hidden arteries of snowmelt. But Mount Qilian is more than just a natural reservoir, it is also a place of deep mythological and cultural significance. The name Qilian itself comes from a Xiongnu word, a reminder that this land was once traversed by fierce nomadic confederations that challenged the borders of early Chinese dynasties. In Chinese poetic tradition, the Qilian Mountains are often invoked as a symbol of exile, endurance, and longing. Tang and Song dynasty poets who were banished to frontier outposts wrote of the mountains with a mix of dread and reverence, describing them as desolate, lonely places where the soul could both suffer and be purified. To the Tibetan people, the range is known by another name. The Amni Machen system extends into parts of the Qilian region, and for many Tibetan Buddhists, these mountains are sacred. Pilgrimages were often made around certain peaks, not to reach their summits, which was considered a desecration, but to circle them respectfully, chanting and praying along the way. Some monasteries, built into hidden valleys and sheltered passes, still exist, their prayer flags fluttering beneath the snows. Ecologically, Qilianshan is one of China's most precious mountain habitats. It forms a crucial transition zone between desert steppe and alpine tundra, meaning that both cold-adapted species and desert dwellers can be found in remarkable juxtaposition. Snow leopards, elusive and ghost-like, roam the higher elevations, sharing their territory with blue sheep, Tibetan gazelles, and the endemic Przelsky's gazelle, a rare species once thought extinct, now known to survive in small numbers in protected zones near the range. Golden eagles soar above the ridgelines, and wolves haunt the lower slopes, especially in winter when prey is scarce. The lower valleys and plateaus are used by herders who raise yaks, sheep, and horses on the brief summer pastures. Their black tents and circular yurts are often the only sign of human habitation for many miles, and their lives follow the rhythms of the mountains, moving with the thaw, retreating with the snow. In recent years, some of these communities have adopted solar panels and mobile phones, yet they retain a connection to the land that is ancient and intimate. Visually, the Qilian mountains are staggering in their contrasts. On one side, sand dunes and rock deserts stretch toward the horizon, crackling with heat in summer and swept by biting winds in winter. On the other, green alpine meadows burst into bloom during the brief warm season, with fields of wild rhododendrons, edelweiss, and medicinal herbs spreading like carpets beneath jagged peaks. Waterfalls cascade down from unseen glacier, pooling into turquoise lakes that reflect the stark symmetry of the sky. The light here is piercing, with long twilights and abrupt, cloud-scraped sunsets that give the landscape an otherworldly aura. Surreal, silent, and yet somehow vividly alive. One of the most iconic views of the Qilian Range can be seen from Zhangye National Geological Park, where rainbow-colored sandstone formations create an alien foreground to the snow-capped ridges beyond. The red, yellow, and orange banding of the Danxia cliffs seems almost painted by hand, and when seen against the backdrop of distant glacier, it makes for one of the most visually striking vistas in the entire country, a natural dreamscape that seems lifted from a fantasy realm. Despite its grandeur, the Qilian region remains undervisited by international tourists, largely due to its isolation and the harshness of its environment. Yet it is this very inaccessibility that preserves its enchantment. In recent decades, China has taken steps to protect parts of the Qilian Range through the establishment of the Qilian Mountains National Nature Reserve, which spans more than 30,000 square kilometers across both Gansu and Qinghai. These measures aim to safeguard not only the unique flora and fauna but also the water sources that millions depend on downstream. Mount Qilian is a place where boundaries dissolve, between ice and sand, forest and desert, Buddhism and shamanism, empire and wilderness. Its presence is solemn, towering, and strangely gentle, as if the mountains themselves have grown old with the land, content to watch the changing centuries pass beneath their frozen gaze. Few places on Earth hold such stark dualities within a single horizon: serenity and danger, life and emptiness, sky and stone. To walk in the shadow of Qilian is to feel the planet's deeper pulse, cold, distant, but unmistakably real. It is a place where silence speaks volumes, and where every rock, every gust of wind, seems carved with a memory older than history. Mount Jukaping, known locally as Jukaipingshan, stands as the highest point in Guizhou province, its summit reaching an altitude of about 2,900 meters. Unlike the jagged snow peaks or volcanic cones found elsewhere in China, Jukaping presents a different kind of majesty, one defined not by icy peril or ancient temples, but by its surreal expanses of windswept meadows, persistent fog banks, and the quiet pulse of life that flows through one of the country's most ecologically and culturally diverse regions. It is a mountain of subtle drama, a place where clouds graze the earth, and where green seems to stretch endlessly into the mist. The name Jukaping roughly translates to Chai Flat Mountain, a name that speaks volumes about its character. The summit is not a needle-thin spire or craggy ridge but a broad, rolling plateau blanketed in wild grasslands, resembling a massive natural lawn at the roof of Guizhou. During spring and early summer, the mountaintop becomes a sea of wild chives, slender green stalks that undulate in the wind like waves. This aromatic herb, for which the mountain is named, has been harvested by local communities for centuries, not only as food but also for use in traditional herbal remedies. But it's not only chives that bloom here. The meadows of Jukaping are renowned for their floral displays, which burst forth in stunning density and color during the warm seasons. Rhododendrons, gentians, primroses, and countless other alpine flowers coat the hills in brilliant pinks, purples, yellows, and whites. The sheer breadth of flowering diversity has earned the mountain the nickname Guizhou's Alps among local nature lovers, and during peak bloom, the entire summit appears like a living painting, a soft-focused dream world cradled by the clouds. The visual impact of Jukaping is heightened by its ever-present fog, which rolls in like a living thing, often without warning. Dense, milky curtains of vapor can sweep across the landscape in minutes, hiding the world in whiteness, then part just as quickly to reveal blue skies and sun-dappled meadows. This dance of visibility and obscurity gives the mountain an unreal, almost enchanted quality. To stand at the summit in the midst of this fog, with flowers underfoot and silence all around, is to feel as though you've stepped into a mythical land halfway between earth and sky. The atmospheric moisture of the region supports an unusual mix of subtropical and alpine plant life, making Jukaping a botanical haven. Scientists have noted that the unique microclimates created by the mountain's shape and elevation enable rare and endemic species to thrive. The slopes are home to dwarf forests, mossy groves, and stunted conifers twisted by years of wind. Lower down, one finds stretches of bamboo, rhododendron thickets, and fern-covered gullies. This ecological richness has made the area a focus for conservationists and botanists, particularly in recent years as climate shifts begin to threaten delicate highland ecosystems. Despite its wildness, Mount Jukaping is not isolated from human culture. It rises near the border of Bijie and Hejiang counties, regions inhabited by several of China's ethnic minority groups, particularly the Yi and Miao people. These communities have shaped the landscape for generations through seasonal herding, traditional farming, and herbal foraging. Their wooden stilt houses, often painted with bright patterns, are scattered across the foothills, and their festivals, especially the Torch Festival of the Yi people, bring the mountain to life with music, fire, and costume. On certain days, one can hear the haunting echoes of traditional flutes or the rhythmic pulse of drums drifting up from the valleys below. While Jukaping remains relatively underdeveloped in terms of mass tourism, recent years have seen a growing interest in its natural beauty. A modest road now winds toward the summit, allowing access to scenic spots and designated viewing platforms. From these heights, visitors can look out across the undulating sea of grass and watch clouds spill like waterfalls over neighboring ridgelines. On clear days, the visibility can extend for tens of kilometers, revealing distant karst hills and patchwork farmlands far below. And on rare, exceptionally clear mornings, a phenomenon known as the cloud sea occurs, in which the lower valleys are completely submerged under a flowing blanket of mist, leaving only the mountain peaks poking above, like islands in an ephemeral ocean. One of the most striking features of Jukaping's summit plateau is its sense of openness, an almost unnatural vastness that plays tricks on the eye. There are few landmarks, few interruptions in the rolling sea of grass, and this can cause even seasoned trekkers to lose their sense of direction. The landscape folds in upon itself subtly, gently, and without sharp transitions, making every step both familiar and slightly alien. It's an environment that encourages introspection, the kind of space where silence has weight and time seems to slow down. At night, when the fog lifts and skies clear, Jukaping becomes a stargazer's paradise. The absence of light pollution allows the Milky Way to stretch vividly across the heavens, and the thin, clean air at high elevation makes for unusually sharp visibility. Local guides sometimes lead night hikes to the summit for this very reason, to offer travelers a chance to stand alone in the stillness, thousands of meters above the world, beneath a sky filled with fire and infinity. For all its beauty, Jukaping is still vulnerable. Increased tourism has brought concerns over habitat disturbance, and local authorities are working to balance access with conservation. Most of the mountain remains protected, and efforts are underway to train local residents as eco-guides and caretakers, ensuring that the natural rhythms of the mountain are not disrupted by careless development. In the end, what makes Jukaping truly unreal is not its drama but its subtlety, its quiet, persistent majesty. It is not a mountain that demands or through danger or grandeur, but one that reveals its wonders slowly, in layers. The hush of wind through wild chives, the sudden flash of blue sky through mist, the whispered history of those who have lived on its slopes for centuries. It is a landscape of transitions, between climates, between cultures, between visibility and obscurity. A place that refuses to be rushed or conquered, and instead invites you to wander, to breathe, and to see. Mount Dabie, or Dabieshan, sprawls across the tri-province junction of Anhui, Henan, and Hubei, forming a vast and mysterious upland region that serves as both a geographic barrier and a hidden ecological treasure. Unlike the snow-capped giants of the west or the temple-clad peaks of central China, Dabieshan captivates with its quiet immensity, a tangle of ridgelines, cloaked in fog and ancient forest, whose modest elevations conceal a labyrinth of biodiversity and history. It is a mountain that whispers rather than shouts, whose magic unfolds in slow detail through its shadows, moss-draped slopes, and murmuring streams. The range itself is expansive, more of a mountainous region than a single peak. Its highest point, Chantang's High, rises to approximately 1,729 meters and is often regarded as the symbolic summit of the Dabie Mountains. But the soul of Dabieshan cannot be captured in a single pinnacle. It lies in the sweeping continuity of mid-altitude hills, folded valleys, hidden ravines, and forested shoulders that stretch for over 500 kilometers, forming a natural divide between the Yangtze and Huai river systems. It is this location, as both a hydrological boundary and an ecological transition zone, that makes Dabieshan truly remarkable. Dabie straddles the line between North and South China, and this liminal geography has allowed it to develop one of the richest collections of flora and fauna in the country. Botanists often refer to it as a green Noah's Ark, for within its humid folds grow over 3,000 species of plants, including rare medicinal herbs, ancient ginkgos, and endemic orchids found nowhere else on Earth. Towering broadleaf forests blanket the slopes, shifting gradually into bamboo groves and high-altitude conifer stands. During spring and summer, wildflowers bloom in the undergrowth while birdsong echoes from the canopies above, thrushes, cuckoos, and the elusive silver pheasant among them. This ecological bounty has made Dabie a cradle of traditional Chinese medicine for centuries. Generations of herbalists and healers have walked its forest paths, foraging for angelica, magnolia bark, ginseng, and other potent remedies. Even today, local villagers and medicine gatherers carry on this tradition, often with intricate knowledge passed down through family lines, a living link between natural bounty and cultural heritage. But the biodiversity doesn't stop at the botanical level. Dabie is home to over 500 vertebrate species, including clouded leopards, golden cats, civets, and multiple species of macaques. The rich array of amphibians and insects, many still poorly studied, makes it a biological frontier for researchers. In particular, the lower valleys and wetlands support a wide variety of frogs and newts, whose delicate life cycles are intertwined with the seasonal rhythms of the mountain. The region's constant mist, fed by monsoon moisture from the south and the mountain's unique microclimates, gives it an ethereal, almost primeval appearance. Entire ridges disappear into cloud banks, while ancient stone stairways glisten with moss and water droplets. Streams, born from countless hidden springs, rush down the slopes in silver ribbons, tumbling over rocks and fanning into waterfalls that remain unnamed, unknown to all but locals and explorers. These veils of vapor not only preserve the mountain's mystique but also help sustain its delicate ecosystems by regulating temperature and moisture year-round. Beyond nature, Dabie is steeped in human history, though much of it remains cloaked in the same kind of obscurity as its terrain. Archaeological evidence suggests that the mountain region has been inhabited for thousands of years, serving as a refuge and a cultural buffer zone. It was here that various ancient cultures mixed and clashed, and where minority groups, including the Hakka and Tujia, later found seclusion and survival. In more recent centuries, the Dabie Mountains played a significant role during times of upheaval. During the early 20th century, its dense forests and rugged terrain provided ideal cover for guerrilla forces and revolutionaries. The region was an important base area during the Chinese Civil War, where communist forces conducted resistance and built rural support networks. Today, red tourism, visits to revolutionary historical sites, coexists with ecotourism, and some former battlegrounds have been turned into museums and memorial trails, carefully integrated into the surrounding landscape. Culturally, Dabie is a melting pot of traditions. Local villages, often nestled in steep valleys or perched along terrace slopes, still practice age-old customs in farming, cuisine, and ritual. Bamboo flutes, stone-carved spring altars, and folklore festivals survive in small pockets, handed down quietly through generations. The famous Dabie Mountain Tea, a high-altitude green tea with a mellow, floral aroma, is cultivated in these villages and has gained regional prestige for its purity and distinctiveness. The lifestyle here remains largely tied to the rhythms of the mountain, planting in the misty spring, harvesting under golden autumn leaves, gathering herbs when the moon is high, or tending to rice terraces carved like calligraphy into the hillsides. From a visual standpoint, Dabie doesn't offer the sheer, vertical drama of China's granite peaks, but it compensates with intimacy and scale. Every bend in the path reveals another forest glade, another mist-veiled ravine, another crumbling shrine or weathered stone steely half-swallowed by vines. The sensory experience of walking in Dabie is immersive, the damp scent of earth and leaves, the sound of unseen water trickling through mossy channels, the touch of cool mist on your skin, and the sight of butterflies flitting like colored confetti through shafts of light. Modern trails and eco-lodges nowed the region, particularly in scenic spots such as Chantangshui and Baimejian, but much of Dabie remains untouched by mass tourism. That balance, between preservation and accessibility, is delicate and ongoing. Fortunately, much of the region is now protected under the Dabie Mountains National Nature Reserve, which has helped stem deforestation and illegal development. Conservation projects are being supported by both government and international environmental agencies, focusing on maintaining habitat integrity, regulating tourism, and involving local communities in sustainable livelihoods. Ultimately, Mount Dabie is not a place that reveals itself all at once. Its grandeur lies in layers: geological, ecological, cultural, and historical. To explore it is to move through a world suspended between time and terrain, where every trail feels ancient and every forest breathes with memory. It is a place where fog softens every outline, where silence is broken only by birds and wind, and where the unreal is not dramatic but deeply, patiently profound. Mount Laojun, located in Henan Province near the city of Luoyang, is one of China's most sacred and visually striking Taoist mountains, a place where theology and topography interlace with astonishing elegance. Rising to over 2,200 meters, this towering peak is often cloaked in clouds and mystery, a celestial spire that has, for centuries, been believed to be the dwelling place of Laozi, the semi-mythical founder of Taoism and author of the Tao Te Ching. It is this spiritual association that infuses Mount Laojun with a profound and enduring sanctity, turning its craggy ridges and sky-piercing cliffs into places of pilgrimage, meditation, and awe. The mountain's name, Laojun, literally means Old Lord, a respectful honorific for Laozi. Legend holds that Laozi retreated here after leaving the Zhou imperial court, seeking solitude in nature and ultimate harmony with the Tao, the ineffable way that lies behind all things. Whether fact or fable, this narrative has defined the mountain's spiritual character ever since. The geography of the mountain only deepens the legend. Sheer cliffs fall away into misty ravines, jagged stone steps seem to ascend into the clouds themselves, and narrow plank roads cling impossibly to vertical rock faces, daring visitors to follow in the footsteps of sages. At the heart of Mount Laojun's sacred terrain is the Laojun Palace, a golden-roofed temple complex perched dramatically atop a crag known as Jinding, or the Golden Summit. The temple's gleaming roofs catch the sunlight and blaze like a celestial beacon, even when the surrounding valleys are shrouded in thick cloud. From afar, the structure appears suspended between earth and sky, as if resting not on rock, but on the breath of the mountain itself. The golden pavilions, draped in red banners and surrounded by stone carvings of dragons and phoenixes, house ancient Taoist texts, statues of deities, and incense-filled prayer halls where the faithful still come to seek insight and divine balance. The journey to the summit is no casual stroll. Visitors must ascend hundreds, sometimes thousands, of stone steps carved into the mountain, winding through forests of pine and cypress that echo with birdsong and the soft jangle of prayer chimes. In some sections, the trail narrows into wooden plank walkways bolted directly into sheer cliffs. These famous cliff-hanging paths are both nerve-wracking and breathtaking, offering vertigo-inducing views of the valleys far below, and the illusion that one is walking on air. At several points, the trail offers views into mist-filled gorges where waterfalls fall in slow motion through space, and the sound of rushing water mingles with the call of distant monks' bells. The entire mountain is dotted with Taoist shrines, each dedicated to different celestial beings or natural forces, forming a kind of terrestrial constellation of worship. These shrines often blend almost invisibly into their surroundings, built of stone and aged wood, their roof tiles covered in moss, their walls softened by time and moisture. Many are reachable only by small side paths, deliberately hidden from the main trails to allow solitude for meditation and prayer. At sunrise, the mountain takes on a different life. Light filters through the clouds in golden shafts, illuminating temple spires and casting long shadows across the stone steps, as if the mountain itself is waking from a centuries-old dream. Mount Laojun is part of the Greater Funyo mountain range and lies within the core of the Laojinshan National Park, a protected zone that safeguards both its cultural heritage and its astonishing biodiversity. Despite its spiritual fame, the mountain is also a natural paradise, home to over 1,500 species of plants and animals. The forests here are alive with ancient trees, some believed to be over 1,000 years old, as well as red-billed blue magpies, civets, and the rare clouded leopard, which still prowls the remote highlands. Medicinal herbs, long associated with Taoist healing traditions, grow abundantly along shaded slopes and rocky terraces. Their collection is carefully regulated today, but their presence connects modern-day visitors to a lineage of mountain sages who once lived in isolation here, practicing inner alchemy and healing arts. One of the most visually surreal experiences on Mount Laojun is the encounter with the so-called Heavenly Bridge, a narrow ridgeline that connects two knife-edge peaks via a natural saddle. On either side, sheer drops plunge into misty oblivion. Standing on this ridge, with wind rushing past and clouds swirling at your feet, it's easy to see how the ancients believed this place to be a threshold between the human and the divine. In Taoist cosmology, mountains are the Earth's spiritual antennas, drawing celestial qi, energy, from the heavens and concentrating it into the landscape. Mount Laojun, with its majestic symmetry and impossibly vertical forms, exemplifies this idea perfectly. Every crag, tree, and gust of wind seems to pulse with the essence of the Tao. Unlike many famous Chinese peaks, Laojianshan has managed to maintain a quiet dignity, despite increased tourism in recent years. While well-developed paths and cable cars have made access easier for pilgrims and sightseers alike, strict conservation rules and architectural guidelines have preserved the mountain's authenticity. Temples are restored in traditional style, modern buildings are prohibited near sacred zones, and guided tours emphasize cultural education over commercial spectacle. During traditional festivals, particularly the birthday of Laozi in the second lunar month, the mountain becomes a living stage of devotion. Pilgrims from across China gather here to chant sutras, burn incense, and perform ancient rites beneath the stars. Ritual music, performed with flutes, gongs, and slow, rhythmic drums, floats through the mountain air, mingling with birdsong and the rustle of leaves. At night, the temples glow softly with lantern light, and the golden roofs shimmer faintly under the moon, a scene so serene and otherworldly, it seems painted rather than real. But Mount Laojun is not merely a place to visit, it is a place to experience. To walk its paths is to walk a spiritual labyrinth, not marked by direction but by presence. Every breath taken at high altitude seems fuller, every pause beside a shrine deeper. For those attuned to Taoist philosophy, the mountain is a physical embodiment of the Tao itself, constant yet ever-changing, silent yet full of life, challenging yet deeply welcoming. And for those simply seeking beauty, serenity, and a taste of something ancient and vast, Mount Laojun offers all of that and more. It is a place that asks nothing of you, but in return, offers peace, perspective, and the lingering sense that you have brushed, however briefly, against the eternal. Mount Pingdingshan, aptly named Flat Top Mountain, rises with quiet authority from the rugged landscapes of Shaanxi Province. Unlike the jagged peaks or sacred ridges that define many of China's legendary mountains, Pingdingshan is notable for its unusual geomorphology. A broad, level summit that appears almost as though an invisible hand had sliced the peak off cleanly, leaving a vast natural platform poised above the surrounding countryside. This strange shape, both strategic and surreal, has made the mountain a place of power, legend, and panoramic perspective for centuries. Geologically, the flat summit is the result of millions of years of uplift and erosion, a natural mesa that once may have been a high plateau, gradually isolated from neighboring formations. But while nature sculpted the platform, it was human history that gave Pingdingshan its unique legacy. For much of its recorded past, this mountain was more than a feature of the terrain, it was a fortress. The flat top, difficult to reach and easy to defend, made it an ideal location for military watchtowers, fortifications, and resistance outposts. Historical records from the Ming and Qing periods speak of military garrisons stationed atop Pingdingshan to guard trade routes and monitor incursions through the narrow mountain passes of Shaanxi, a province long seen as a gateway to the north. Indeed, during times of war, the summit served as a natural bastion, a commanding perch from which armies could observe enemy movements for dozens of kilometers in every direction. From its peak, one can see across a seemingly endless sweep of valleys, riverbeds, and rolling hills, with no obstructions to the horizon but the curvature of the earth itself. The surrounding lands below, crisscrossed by old caravan routes and farming villages, once fell under the watchful gaze of soldiers stationed high above. In many ways, Pingdingshan was less a traditional battlefield than a giant eye in the sky, a place of surveillance, control, and silent readiness. Some traces of its militarized past still remain. Crumbling stone walls, weathered gate foundations, and scattered relics have been found near the summit's edges, half buried beneath grass and lichen. Oral histories from nearby villagers recount tales of hidden tunnels and secret caches, some of which have been unearthed in recent years by archaeologists uncovering rusted weaponry, iron arrowheads, and fragments of ancient armor. These stories paint a vivid picture of the mountain during its time as a frontier sentinel, standing guard over the troubled dynastic borders of imperial China. But time, as it always does, has transformed Pingdingshan. Today, the military presence is gone, and in its place is a vast, open summit that has become a pilgrimage site of a different kind. for hikers, photographers, and nature lovers drawn to the surreal vastness of this mountaintop world. The climb to the top is steep but rewarding, with well-marked trails that pass through groves of pine, wild rose, and oak. Along the way, hikers encounter birdsong, rustling leaves, and occasional glimpses of foxes, squirrels, and mountain hares darting between stones. The air is crisp, especially in the early morning when fog still hugs the lower ridges, creating the illusion of an island floating above the clouds. When one finally reaches the summit, the experience is unlike any other mountain in the region. Instead of a narrow peak or precipice, the summit unfolds as a vast, natural terrace, a grass-covered plateau where the wind whispers across open fields and travelers can walk for hundreds of meters in any direction without encountering a slope. The effect is surreal. You are clearly on top of the world, yet the ground beneath you feels like a meadow, not a mountain. In summer, wildflowers dot the surface like embroidery, while in winter, the snow lays down a flawless white sheet that glistens under the low sun, interrupted only by the footprints of deer or the trails of windblown leaves. Because of this openness, the sky above Pingdingshan seems impossibly vast. Sunrise and sunset are especially dramatic. At dawn, the horizon catches fire in hues of orange, red, and indigo, while the valleys below remain shadowed in deep blue, a sight that feels like the world awakening from the top down. At dusk, the reverse occurs, and the light recedes across the plateau like a tide, painting the grass golden and the rocks a deep, iron grey. On clear nights, the summit becomes a haven for stargazing. With no light pollution for miles around, the Milky Way stretches like a ribbon across the heavens, and constellations seem close enough to touch. Despite its relative lack of built structures, Pingdingshan has not been untouched by spiritual belief. Ancient stele inscriptions found along the paths and near the summit suggest that Taoist hermits once used the mountain as a place of retreat. The combination of elevation, isolation, and sweeping visibility made it ideal for those seeking harmony with nature and contemplation of the Tao. In more recent centuries, local villagers constructed small shrines at the base of the mountain to honor mountain spirits and ancestors, a practice still alive today during seasonal festivals, when incense and offerings are laid out beneath the shadow of the cliffs. Ecologically, Pingdingshan supports a rich variety of flora due to its unique microclimate. The flat summit collects rainfall and dew in shallow depressions, creating small seasonal pools and wetlands that sustain amphibians, grasses, and wildflowers not found elsewhere in the region. Some sections of the summit plateau have developed miniature ecosystems, with insect life and bird species adapted to the open, elevated terrain. These ecological niches, fragile and beautiful, have made the area a target for conservation efforts in recent years, especially as interest in ecotourism grows. Unlike more famous Chinese mountains which are thick with temples or tourist infrastructure, Pingdingshan has preserved its spacious solitude. A few modest viewing pavilions and safety railings now mark the edges of particularly sheer drops, but the summit remains refreshingly untouched. There is no noise but the wind, no structures to compete with the view, only the sense of infinite space, ancient time, and quiet endurance. Perhaps the most unreal thing about Mount Pingdingshan is this sense of paradox, that a place so high can feel so grounded, that a former military stronghold could now be a haven of peace, and that a flat expanse atop a mountain could stir such deep emotion. Standing on its summit, with the vast land unfurled below and the sky stretching endlessly above, one is reminded not of domination or conquest, but of perspective, of how small we are in the presence of such enduring majesty, and how strange and beautiful the earth can be when it chooses to shape itself in defiance of expectation. Mount Phoenix, or Fenghuangshan, emerges from the vast, undulating sea of Inner Mongolia's grasslands like a mythical guardian carved by wind and time. True to its name, which refers to the revered Fenghuang, the legendary Chinese phoenix, this mountain bears an uncanny resemblance to the elegant posture of a bird in repose, wings folded delicately at its sides, with a poised beak reaching out toward the horizon. Locals have long regarded the mountain as a spiritual creature made stone, a phoenix that descended from the heavens and chose to rest forever on the northern plains. Set against the sprawling steppes of Inner Mongolia, Mount Phoenix is less known than the dramatic karst peaks of the south or the snow-laden ranges of the west, but its quiet, sculptural grace has a power all its own. Rising gently above a plain that seems to roll on forever, Fenghuangshan is not an especially tall mountain, yet it commands immense visual and cultural significance. Its bird-like shape is not an exaggeration conjured by legend. From certain angles, the resemblance is uncanny, with layered ridges forming the spread of wings and a slender summit stretching out like the beak of the mythical bird. At sunrise, this resemblance becomes hauntingly real. The first light of day catches the eastern flank of the mountain, casting a golden glow across its ridges and illuminating the head of the phoenix as if it were waking from a long, celestial slumber. The rest of the mountain slowly emerges from the shadows, layer by layer, until it appears to shimmer like feathers catching the morning sun. It is no wonder that this mountain is considered one of the most photogenic and symbolically charged places in Inner Mongolia, a living embodiment of rebirth, peace, and continuity. Fenghuangshan is located near the transitional zone between grassland and desert, where arid breezes carry the scent of dry earth and wild herbs. The terrain surrounding the mountain is mostly open plain, dotted with herds of grazing sheep, occasional yurts, and winding trails used by nomads and shepherds for centuries. There is an extraordinary stillness in this land, a silence broken only by the soft rustle of grass, the distant call of hawks, or the rhythmic jingling of bells tied around livestock. Despite its open surroundings, Mount Phoenix is far from barren. Its slopes host a surprising variety of plant life, especially in the warmer seasons. Low-lying shrubs, sagebrush, and resilient grasses take root in the thin, rocky soil, while clusters of wildflowers bloom in spring and early summer. Lavender, yellow buttercups, and tiny alpine irises bursting forth from crevices in the stone. This seasonal transformation gives the mountain a shifting color palette, from dusty browns in winter to brilliant greens and purples during the short northern summer. Hiking up Fenghuangshan is a tranquil but meditative journey. There are no commercial paths paved with stone or staircases carved by dynasties. The mountain is still raw, largely untouched by heavy tourism or development. The ascent is done by way of well-worn footpaths and animal trails that snake up the mountain's contours, guiding the traveler through scattered boulders and groves of low juniper. Along the way, one might encounter wild marmots peeking from their burrows, or falcons circling overhead, silhouetted against the sky like omens or guardians. Though not a religious site in the traditional temple-heavy sense, Fenghuangshan is deeply spiritual in a broader, elemental way. In ancient times, shamans and sky-worshipping priests from the Xianbei and other nomadic tribes are said to have performed rituals on the mountain, believing it to be a sacred resting place of the heavenly bird, a bridge between the earthly world and the sky realm. Offerings of milk, roasted grains, and incense were left on stone altars to ask for blessings, fertility, rain, or success in battle. To this day, some local Mongol families still visit the mountain during important festivals, bringing with them ceremonial scarves known as kadags, which they tie to cairns and branches as tokens of respect and prayer. A peculiar feature of Mount Phoenix is a naturally occurring cleft on the summit ridge that some interpret as the eye of the bird. Looking through it at certain times of the year, especially during equinox sunrises, the view aligns perfectly with the rising sun, creating a brief but powerful spectacle where light pours through the gap like a beam from another world. Many locals believe this moment to be a time when wishes whispered into the wind may be carried into the heavens by the phoenix itself. In autumn, the landscape surrounding Mount Phoenix transforms into a quilt of ochre and gold. The nearby grasslands turn rust-colored and tawny, waving in the wind like a sea of fire. During this season, the mountain seems especially alive, glowing in the amber light of sunset, its shape more pronounced, its silhouette more dramatic. Shepherds often bring their flocks closer to the base, where the grasses are thickest and the earth still holds warmth, and many photographers make the pilgrimage then, hoping to capture the perfect moment when the phoenix seems to rise again in flame. Though small compared to the towering peaks of Tibet or the Himalayas, Mount Phoenix's influence on the culture and folklore of the region is profound. In stories passed down through generations, it is said that when disaster looms, famine, war, or plague, the phoenix will open its stone wings and rise once more, its shadow blanketing the land, its cry heralding either great change or divine protection. In this way, the mountain is not only a symbol of beauty and wonder, but of guardianship and rebirth, embodying the mythical balance between destruction and renewal. Efforts have been made in recent years to preserve the integrity of Mount Phoenix's ecosystem and spiritual identity. While small eco-trails and information boards have been introduced to guide respectful visitors, large-scale infrastructure has been deliberately avoided. The goal is to maintain the delicate balance that makes this place so unreal, the fusion of myth, land, light, and silence that cannot be replicated elsewhere. To stand on Fenghuangshan at sunrise is to feel, for a moment, like you are part of something ancient and larger than yourself. The air is still, the horizon infinite, and the shape of the phoenix stretches beneath your feet like a dream half remembered. Here, in this quiet corner of Inner Mongolia, where sky and earth embrace with such gentle clarity, the unreal becomes real, and the bird of legend sleeps eternally in stone. Mount Baihua, or Baihuashan, literally 100 Flowers Mountain, lies nestled in the western outskirts of Beijing, cloaked in a reputation as one of the city's most vibrant and naturally exquisite getaways. Despite its proximity to the vast urban sprawl of the Chinese capital, Baihuashan feels like a world apart. A serene, floral wonderland where mist-laced pine forests, carpeted wildflower meadows, and slow-winding ridgelines create a natural tapestry that changes color and scent with every passing season. It is not simply a place of beauty, it is a sanctuary of contrast, between city and wilderness, human noise and forest silence, lowland humidity and mountain air clarity. Rising to an elevation of just under 2,000 meters, Mount Baihua is the highest peak in Beijing municipality, and though it lacks the dramatic verticality of other famous Chinese peaks, its charm lies in subtlety and abundance. True to its name, it boasts more than 1,700 species of plants, including over 150 varieties of wildflowers that bloom during spring and summer. These blooms, golden lilies, wild orchids, alpine asters, gentians, foxglove, primulas, and more, create an ever-shifting field of color that dances in the breeze beneath towering pine and fir trees. The most celebrated time to visit Baihuashan is between late June and August, when its highland meadows erupt into full floral splendor. Entire hillsides are blanketed in blossoms, giving the appearance of rolling painted fields beneath a crisp blue sky. In the early morning, when fog drifts low across the valleys, the flowers seem to float in a dreamlike haze, and by midday, butterflies and bees move through the petals like living brushstrokes of color. The scent in the air is not overpowering but layered, earthy pine resin mingling with subtle floral sweetness and a hint of cool alpine breeze. But flowers are only part of Baihuashan's allure. The mountain also supports a rich and biodiverse ecosystem. Dense forests of spruce, larch, and pine cover much of the mountain slopes, gradually giving way to subalpine meadows as elevation increases. These forests are home to a surprising variety of wildlife, including hares, badgers, foxes, and numerous bird species such as cuckoos, warblers, and woodpeckers. Occasionally, wild boars or even the elusive golden pheasant may be spotted at dawn or dusk, slipping between the trees. The human history of Baihuashan is less about imperial grandeur and more about quiet devotion and rustic simplicity. Though not a major Taoist or Buddhist pilgrimage site, the mountain has long been revered by locals as a place of spiritual nourishment. Small stone altars and incense stands can still be found tucked along the trails, often beside old trees believed to harbor mountain spirits or protective deities. In some areas, local villagers leave offerings of fruit or flowers, whispering prayers into the wind that's said to carry their hopes across the peaks. The hiking trails that wind through Baihuashan are among the most scenic in the Beijing region. There are gentle paths suitable for casual walkers and more demanding ascents that appeal to seasoned trekkers. One of the most beloved routes is the Baihua Ridge Trail, which follows the undulating backbone of the mountain and offers panoramic views of the surrounding countryside, a vast sea of ridges stretching toward the western horizon. On clear days, distant silhouettes of other ranges shimmer faintly in the summer haze. In autumn, these same ridgelines burst into flame-like hues, with forests turning shades of copper, crimson, and gold, rivaling the famed fall foliage of more northerly provinces. One of the most unique features of Baihuashan is its ever-present interplay between mist and sunlight. Due to its elevation and climate, the mountain frequently experiences low-hanging clouds and drifting fog banks, especially in the early morning or after rainfall. These weather patterns lend the mountain an ethereal quality. Trees become silhouettes. Meadows become blurred patches of light and shadow. Voices carry softly through the fog, barely louder than the sound of wind brushing through pine needles. It is in these moments that Baihuashan feels most unreal, like a mountain lifted from the pages of a Chinese ink painting. In fact, Baihuashan has long inspired poets and painters from the capital, especially during the Ming and Qing dynasties. Scholars would retreat to the mountain to escape the oppressive summer heat of the lowlands, seeking not just cooler air but clarity of thought. With scrolls and brushes, they recorded the fleeting beauty of dew-covered petals or the quiet dignity of a lone pine clinging to a crag. Even today, it's not uncommon to see painters and photographers lingering for hours along a single slope, trying to capture the ever-changing play of light and flora. Modern efforts to preserve Baihuashan's ecological and cultural value have led to the creation of the Baihuashan National Nature Reserve, a protected zone that limits vehicle access and prohibits development in key areas. Visitors are encouraged to tread lightly, to stay on designated trails, and to leave no trace behind. Local guides and park rangers, many of whom are descended from villagers who have lived near the mountain for generations, share stories of medicinal herbs hidden among the undergrowth or explain how certain plants change their orientation with the season to better absorb sunlight. While the summer is the most popular season, those who come in winter are treated to an entirely different landscape. Snow drapes the mountain like a white quilt, softening every contour and silencing every sound. The pines wear coats of frost, and the frozen ground crunches underfoot. With few other visitors around, the mountain becomes a place of intense solitude and reflection, as if sleeping beneath its own blanket of time. In every season, Baihuashan offers something unique: the pastel riot of summer blossoms, the golden lull of autumn, the silent purity of winter, and the tentative green unfurling of early spring. Its gentle slopes, while not dramatic, hold layers of meaning, both natural and emotional, for those who seek not grandeur, but serenity. To wander through Baihuashan is not just to walk among flowers, but to enter a living poem written in color, wind, and light. It is a place that reminds its visitors of the quiet miracles that bloom in the shadow of cities, and how even the most delicate of things, a single petal, a hidden spring, a pine branch traced in frost, can transform the world for those who truly see them. Mount Qianping in Suzhou, Jiangsu province, may not be the tallest or most rugged of China's mountains, but what it lacks in size, it more than compensates for in elegance, cultural symbolism, and artistic legacy. Rising gently to just over 200 meters in height, Mount Qianping, whose name means level heaven, is a cultivated peak shaped not by glacial upheaval or volcanic fury, but by centuries of human admiration, aesthetic sensibility, and literati reverence. Here, nature is not conquered or worshipped in monumental terms. It is appreciated, harmonized with, painted, and preserved in miniature and metaphor. Located to the west of Suzhou's old city, Mount Qianping sits amid a region famous for its gardens, canals, and classical artistry. In fact, Qianping is sometimes regarded as an extension of Suzhou's traditional garden culture, albeit on a slightly grander, more elevated scale. The mountain slopes, though modest, are intricately adorned with ornamental stones, artificial grottos, sculpted pines, and winding walkways that have been maintained and refined over centuries. What appears at first to be natural is often subtly guided, in the way a rock is placed to resemble a crouching tiger, or a bamboo grove is curved to frame the rising sun just so. Qianping's fame largely stems from its association with Fan Zhongyan, a revered statesman, philosopher, and poet of the Northern Song dynasty. He was born nearby and is buried on the mountain slope, and his legacy continues to draw scholars, students, and those who admire his moral clarity and dedication to civic duty. The mountain became a site of cultural pilgrimage in his honor, and inscriptions, steles, and memorial halls dedicated to his memory still stand today, nestled among the pines and moss-covered paths. Fan's famous dictum, "Be the first to worry about the nation's troubles, and the last to enjoy its pleasures," is often invoked here, making the mountain not only a place of beauty but also of quiet patriotic reflection. But perhaps even more deeply, Qianping Mountain is revered for its stones. Known as Qianping stones, these naturally weathered boulders and rock outcroppings are famous throughout China for their unusual shapes, elegant contours, and spiritual suggestiveness. These stones have long been prized by Chinese scholars and garden designers, who would transport them great distances to place them in classical gardens, often as the central feature in a designed landscape. Unlike Western traditions that might prize symmetrical or polished stones, Chinese aesthetics often favor asymmetry, texture, and suggestion. A stone that evokes a mountain, or a crag that resembles a sleeping dragon. Many of the most famous scholars' gardens of Suzhou, including the Lingering Garden and the Master of the Nets Garden, contain stones sourced from Mount Qianping. Because of this tradition, Qianping has often been referred to as a living stone gallery, and walking through its paths can feel like entering a three-dimensional ink scroll. Each turn of the trail offers a new composition: a gnarled pine bending over a craggy boulder, a solitary pagoda framed by distant hills, or a cascade of water slipping over dark stone into a quiet pool. It is a mountain of vignettes rather than vistas. One does not scale Qianping for summit glory, but for perspective, for the shifting interplay of moss, rock, and branch that speaks to the soul of Chinese landscape philosophy. This connection to Chinese painting is profound. Many famous landscape painters of the Ming and Qing dynasties visited Qianping, sketching its forms and studying the way mist gathers around its ridges in early morning. These painters were often inspired not by grand panoramas but by intimate moments: the angle of a twisted trunk, the suggestion of movement in still stone, the way water reflects shadowed bamboo. This style of observation helped to shape the Shan Shui tradition, literally mountain and water, that dominated classical Chinese landscape painting for centuries. In this aesthetic universe, Mount Qianping occupies a cherished space, humble, refined, deeply poetic. Qianping is especially beautiful in the autumn months, when its forests of maple, sweet gum, and ginkgo trees blaze in red and gold. The ancient stone steps leading to its various pavilions and grottos become littered with fallen leaves, and the cool air sharpens the scent of pine resin and damp earth. During this time, visitors often ascend slowly, pausing frequently, not from exhaustion, but to absorb each shifting scene as though walking through a gallery of natural paintings. The main path leads past several notable landmarks. The Fan Zhongyan Memorial Hall contains writings, calligraphy, and artifacts related to the statesman's life. Nearby, the Shillong waterfall, though modest in height, adds a gentle soundscape of cascading water to the walk, especially after rain. Scattered throughout the mountain are stone inscriptions carved directly into boulders, some dating back hundreds of years, bearing poems, dedications, and Taoist maxims, often written in elegant clerical script. Despite its proximity to the bustling, industrialized edges of modern Suzhou, Qianping Mountain retains a remarkable tranquility. Part of this is due to strict preservation efforts. Cars are banned beyond a certain point, and visitor numbers are often controlled to reduce ecological strain. But part of it is also due to the spirit of the place, a quiet cultural gravity that seems to draw in those seeking calm, insight, or artistic inspiration rather than excitement or spectacle. In winter, the mountain's character shifts once again. A light snowfall can transform it into a delicate monochrome world, white dusting pine boughs, blanketing the stones, and turning the already contemplative paths into something even more silent and solemn. The sounds of distant temple bells or wind through bare branches seem amplified in the hush. Even the ornamental stones take on a different dimension in winter, their shadows deepening, their textures highlighted against the snow. Ultimately, Mount Qianping is a place not of elevation but of elevation of spirit. It has been climbed not to reach the sky, but to descend into thought, to connect the outer landscapes of rock and pine with the inner ones of principle, reflection, and creativity. Here, time slows down. The noise of the world fades. And in the subtle arrangement of tree, stone, and mist, one can glimpse the enduring ideals of Chinese philosophy: harmony, restraint, reverence for nature, and beauty not shouted but whispered. Mount Nanshan, situated on the southern coast of Hainan Island near the resort city of Sonya, is unlike any other mountain in China, not for its height or its ruggedness, but for the way it blends tropical ocean scenery with Buddhist spirituality, botanical richness, and serene architectural grandeur. The name Nanshan literally means South Mountain, and its symbolism runs deep in Chinese thought. In Taoist tradition, it is a metaphor for longevity, drawn from the famous poetic phrase, "May you live as long as Nanshan." But here on Hainan, that metaphor becomes vividly real. Lush, evergreen ridges stretch inland from the coastline, and the air, heavy with humidity and the scent of frangipani, feels timeless. The most iconic and awe-inspiring feature of Mount Nan is the towering Guanyin of Nanshan, a 108-meter-tall statue of the Bodhisattva of Compassion that rises dramatically from the sea on a three-sided pedestal. This tri-faced Guanyin is one of the tallest statues in the world and a powerful symbol of spiritual protection facing outward over the South China Sea. One face gazes inland, toward China, offering blessings to the people. The other two look across the ocean, symbolizing compassion extended to the rest of the world. The construction of this immense statue, completed in 2005, was a monumental engineering and spiritual effort that took over 6 years and now draws millions of pilgrims and tourists every year. To approach the Guanyin, visitors pass through the Nanshan Cultural Tourism Zone, a vast complex that blends natural beauty with sacred architecture. The journey itself is deeply symbolic, beginning with wide courtyards surrounded by tropical gardens, palm groves, and flowing water features. The path leads through a series of Buddhist halls, each with its own unique style. some minimalist and zen-like, others ornately painted and glittering with gold. One of the highlights of the area is the Nanshan Temple, a modern yet faithfully designed Buddhist complex built in traditional Tang dynasty style. Though constructed in the 1990s, the temple feels timeless, echoing the serenity and grandeur of ancient Chinese religious sites. Inside the temple, visitors find towering Buddha statues, intricate wood carvings, and incense drifting in slow curls through shafts of tropical sunlight. The sound of chanting and the rhythmic toll of bells blend with the soft roar of the nearby ocean, a harmony of elements that is utterly unique to Nanshan. The mountain itself, though not soaring in elevation like inland ranges, offers a different kind of ascent. Its slopes are densely forested with a mixture of tropical and subtropical plant species. Banyan trees with curtain-like aerial roots, lush ferns, and orchids nestled in the crooks of twisting limbs. Wildlife here is diverse, with colorful butterflies, birds like bulbuls and paradise flycatchers, and occasional sightings of macaques who roam the higher ridges. Walking the shaded trails of Mount Nan, one can sense a softness in the terrain, less craggy than China's more northerly peaks, more sensuous and fertile. One particularly beautiful trail leads through the thousand-year Longevity Valley, a serene landscape where centuries-old banyan trees stretch their branches over clear, reflective pools. Sculptures and inscriptions mark the way, including verses about longevity, peace, and the cyclical nature of life. Unlike some of China's stark sacred peaks where the climb is harsh and the spiritual reward hard-won, Nanshan's spirituality comes gently, like a breeze from the sea, or the slow unfolding of a lotus blossom. It's a place where calm is not imposed, it emerges naturally, from the marriage of landscape and spirit. Another unique aspect of Mount Nan is the Nanshan Buddhist Cultural Garden, which showcases the philosophy and teachings of Buddhism not through texts alone, but through immersive artistic expressions. Here, the Tree of Enlightenment stands, surrounded by plaques bearing the sayings of the Buddha and great masters. The path of virtue winds through symbolic gardens where different virtues are expressed in stone and plant arrangements. The design of these spaces draws from feng shui principles and aims to evoke inner balance through outer harmony. The coastal views from the higher slopes of Nanshan are among the most beautiful on Hainan. The South China Sea stretches out endlessly, a shifting palette of aquamarine, cobalt, and pale jade depending on the light and the time of day. Sunsets from Nanshan are particularly unforgettable. The massive Guanyin statue silhouetted against a glowing sky, waves crashing gently below, and the distant horizon merging with the infinite. It is during these moments that Mount Nan reveals its deeper resonance, a place not just of nature or religion, but of balance between the two, where humanity reaches toward the divine not through conquest of the earth, but through harmony with it. A lesser-known but equally enchanting part of the mountain is the Longevity Food Street, where vegetarian Buddhist cuisine is served according to ancient principles of balance and nourishment. Meals are prepared without garlic, onion, or strong spices, believed to disturb the meditative state, and instead emphasize seasonal produce, gentle flavors, and mindful eating. Dishes like lotus seed soup, wild mushroom stir-fry, and tofu with seaweed are both simple and deeply satisfying, a reflection of the mountain's overall ethos: enough, but never excessive. Nourishing, but never indulgent. While many visitors come to Mount Nan for spiritual reasons, the mountain also plays a role in broader ecological awareness. Hainan, being a relatively untouched tropical island, has been at the forefront of China's environmental conservation efforts. The Nanshan region in particular is part of several reforestation and biodiversity initiatives, aiming to protect the island's unique ecosystem while allowing for respectful, sustainable tourism. Educational centers and guided nature walks are available for those interested in learning more about Hainan's flora, fauna, and traditional medicinal plants. In Chinese mythology, the southern mountains, including Nanshan, were often associated with gateways to paradise, immortal hermits, and celestial temples hidden in clouds. While such legends are not taken literally today, their symbolism still feels appropriate. Mount Nan is not a place of hardship or asceticism, but of gentle awakening, of looking outward and inward at the same time, with the sea and sky as your companions and a statue of divine compassion watching over all. In many ways, Nanshan is China's answer to the fusion of spirituality, natural beauty, and cultural continuity. It is modern but ancient, touristic yet sacred, tropical yet deeply Chinese. It represents not a break from tradition, but its flowering, like a lotus that blooms atop the warm southern waters. And for those who walk its shaded trails, who sit beneath its banyan trees or gaze into the eyes of the Guanyin, it becomes a space of stillness, a pause in the storm of daily life, and a reminder of the better angels of human aspiration. Mount Daming, located in northern Guangxi, is one of southern China's most ethereal and hauntingly beautiful karst landscapes. A world where stone pierces sky, where mists dance along vertical cliffs, and where centuries-old traditions of ethnic minority groups endure in the folds of remote valleys. Though not widely known to international tourists, this mountain, and the Daming Shan scenic area that surrounds it, holds a quiet majesty and cultural richness that rivals many of China's better-known destinations. It is, in essence, a sacred mountain of silence, stone, and survival. The name Daming, meaning great brightness, may seem paradoxical given the thick fogs and low-hanging clouds that often blanket the region. But in local tradition, this brightness refers not to sunlight but to spirit, the luminous essence of life, culture, and nature that permeates the area. The mountain rises within the karst belt of Guangxi, where millennia of water erosion have shaped limestone into towering cliffs, jagged spires, sinkholes, and caves of extraordinary depth. Mount Daming is one of the highest peaks in this region, and from its summit, you can see an undulating sea of green, forests, bamboo groves, and rice terraces spilling down into valleys where time seems to have paused. One of the defining features of Mount Daming is its dramatic cliffs, sheer rock faces that ascend hundreds of meters into the sky with almost no transition from forest to stone. These cliffs are often streaked with mineral stains in ochre, white, and grey, and are sometimes covered in vertical carpets of moss, orchids, and creepers. During the rainy season, waterfalls appear seemingly from nowhere, tumbling in narrow ribbons off the escarpments into hidden ravines below. When the morning mist rises, the scene transforms into something otherworldly, ghostly peaks emerging from veils of cloud, like stone dragons rising from a white ocean. The biodiversity here is exceptional, supported by the subtropical climate and varied topography. Rare species of ferns, orchids, and medicinal plants thrive in the cooler elevations of the mountain, while the lower slopes and valleys are home to bamboo forests, flowering shrubs, and endemic tree species. The mountain is also a sanctuary for wildlife, including macaques, masked civets, and many types of birds, such as the crested goshawk and silver pheasant. This rich natural environment has long been recognized by Chinese conservationists, and parts of the area are protected within the Daming Mountain Nature Reserve. Cultural richness is another defining trait of the region. The villages around Mount Daming are predominantly inhabited by Zhuang, Yao, and Miao ethnic groups, who have lived in these valleys for centuries. These communities have preserved their distinct languages, clothing styles, spiritual beliefs, and architectural traditions. Walking into a Zhuang village, one finds stilted wooden houses with pitched roofs, the fragrance of pine smoke hanging in the air, and old women embroidering bright patterns onto indigo-dyed cloth. The people live in close rhythm with the seasons and the land, cultivating terraced rice, tea, and medicinal herbs on the steep hillsides. Their connection to the mountain is not merely physical, it is spiritual, woven into local myths and rituals. One of the region's most atmospheric traditions is the cloud worship ceremony, practiced in remote Yarrow villages nestled along the mountain's northern flank. This ceremony, held in spring, is rooted in animist belief systems and Taoist cosmology. Villagers offer food, chant prayers, and light incense at cliffside altars to honor the mountain spirits who they believe control the rains and clouds. The ceremony serves both an agricultural function, praying for timely rain, and a communal one, renewing bonds between villagers and their sacred landscape. Observing or participating in such a ritual offers a rare window into a worldview where humans are not conquerors of nature, but respectful children of the mountains. Mount Daming's karst caves also contribute to its mystical aura. Carved over eons by subterranean rivers, these caves range from small crevices to vast chambers filled with stalactites, stalagmites, and stone curtains that shimmer in the beam of a torch. Some of the largest caves, like Long Men, Dragon Gate, and Baiyun, White Cloud, are known locally as gateways to the spirit world. According to folklore, these caverns are haunted by benevolent guardians or ancestral souls who watch over the mountain's health. Local shamans sometimes perform rites here, using singing bowls, incense, and rhythmic chanting to commune with the unseen. Hiking Mount Daming is not for the faint-hearted, but it rewards those who seek its quiet corners. Unlike tourist-saturated mountains such as Huangshan or Amei, the trails here are often lonely, winding through thick foliage, past moss-covered stones and crumbling pagodas lost to the forest. One path, known locally as the Stairway to the Sky, ascends steeply from a valley floor up a rocky ridge lined with wildflowers. Along the way, hikers pass through ancient tea groves and bamboo thickets before emerging onto a narrow summit ridge where the land drops away sharply on both sides. The view from the top is staggering. Dozens of limestone peaks rise in every direction, each wrapped in its own personal cloud. The soundscape of Mount Daming is equally enchanting. There is the constant whisper of wind in the bamboo, the occasional call of a mountain bird, and the far-off splash of water against stone. In the villages, the soundscape changes, drumming during festivals, the clatter of looms weaving cloth, or the haunting notes of the lusheng, a bamboo reed instrument played during dances and courtship rituals. These auditory layers give Mount Daming a texture beyond the visual, one that vibrates with cultural memory and natural presence. Modern development, thankfully, has only lightly touched this remote pocket of Guangxi. There are small eco-guest houses run by local families, where visitors can sleep in simple wooden rooms, eat home-cooked meals with mountain herbs, and wake to the sound of roosters and temple bells echoing through the valley mist. Electricity is present, but Wi-Fi is rare, and mobile signals are intermittent. Here, one is encouraged, if not forced, to slow down, to live with the mountain's own rhythm, rising with the sun, walking under shifting clouds, and sleeping beneath a sky crowded with stars. Perhaps what makes Mount Daming so unreal is the sense of stepping outside of time. The landscape seems carved by dreams, jagged, soft, shifting. The villages feel as though they belong to an older, slower China, where the values of community, spirit, and land remain at the center of life. To visit Mount Daming is not just to climb a peak or photograph a view, it is to encounter a living culture in a sacred land, to breathe in the fog and feel the heartbeat of stone. It is a reminder that some of the most magical places on Earth are not built or marketed. They are preserved, protected, and quietly passed down through generations. Mount Mufu, straddling the border between Hubei and Jiangxi provinces, is a deeply forested and historically rich mountain system known not only for its impressive natural beauty, steep ravines, cloud-wrapped peaks, and thick vegetation, but also for its spiritual and cultural importance, especially within Buddhist traditions. Unlike China's more commercialized sacred mountains, Mufushan remains relatively secluded, cloaked in a veil of mist and myth, drawing those who seek quiet contemplation, dramatic scenery, and a connection to the spiritual currents of old China. The Mufu Mountains, whose name can be roughly translated as the curtain-covered mountains, evoke imagery of long-hanging drapes, appropriate for a range often obscured by heavy fog, especially during spring and summer. The peaks here do not rise to extreme altitudes like those of the Tibetan Plateau or the Tian Shan, but their mid-level elevation, dramatic gorges, and steep gradients lend them a grandeur that feels deeply immersive. Their position at the confluence of southern Hubei and northeastern Jiangxi means they sit within a region of climatic transition, where temperate flora mingles with subtropical species, and the mountain ecology reflects this rare blending. The first impression one receives upon approaching Mount Mufu is its raw and untamed character. The terrain is serrated and heavily forested, with valleys plunging into narrow river-cut canyons, while the ridges and slopes are adorned with ancient pines, camphor trees, and a myriad of wildflowers depending on the season. Trails here are often mossy and shaded, winding between enormous boulders and centuries-old trees. The sound of water is a constant companion, rivulets trickling down from the peaks, small waterfalls crashing into deep pools, and mist rising from moist gullies where ferns and orchids thrive. One of the mountain's most visually arresting features is its deep ravines and chasms, which cleave the landscape like massive, natural amphitheaters. Some are so deep and narrow that sunlight barely touches the bottom for most of the day, creating unique microclimates where rare plant species flourish. Hikers who descend into these ravines find themselves surrounded by echoing stone, cool shadows, and the rhythmic sounds of dripping water and singing birds. In several spots, traditional wooden bridges or stone archways span across gorges, remnants of ancient footpaths used by pilgrims and hermits over centuries. Mount Mufu is not just a natural wonder, it is also a living repository of spiritual and cultural heritage. Scattered across its higher elevations are remote Buddhist temples and monasteries, some of which date back to the Tang and Song dynasties. Unlike the grand, restored temple complexes found on mountains like Amei or Wutai, Mufu's religious sites are often modest and weather-worn, nestled into cliff sides or hidden within forests. Their weathered tiles, incense-blackened altars, and moss-covered courtyards reflect centuries of quiet devotion. One of the most revered among these sites is Guangji Temple, perched at a high elevation and accessible only by a long trek through winding trails. According to local records and legend, this temple was founded by monks fleeing persecution during one of China's many dynastic upheavals, seeking refuge in the inaccessible heart of Mufushan. The temple remains active today, housing a small number of monks who maintain a lifestyle of seclusion, meditation, and traditional Chan, Zen, practice. Pilgrims who reach this remote sanctuary often remark on the palpable sense of stillness that envelops the place, as if time slows down and the modern world recedes with every step deeper into the forest. Even more hidden is Linggu Cave Monastery, a tiny hermitage built into a natural cave near the summit of one of Mufu's central peaks. Reaching it requires navigating a nearly vertical rock stairway that clings to a narrow cliff ledge, with views dropping off into the mist-shrouded abyss below. Inside, the air is cool and damp, with simple stone shrines and a few statues lit by flickering oil lamps. It is said that this cave was once the retreat of a legendary monk known as Master Ming Yang, who was credited with taming tigers and teaching the local villagers the medicinal secrets of the mountain herbs. Whether fact or legend, the story adds another layer of mystique to a landscape already steeped in spiritual gravity. The seasonal beauty of Mount Mufu is another reason it remains a cherished destination for those in the know. In spring, cherry blossoms and mountain azaleas bloom in cascading bursts of pink and white, turning the lower slopes into a painter's palette. Summer brings dense green canopies and gurgling streams ideal for escape from lowland heat. Autumn is perhaps the most spectacular, with the forests igniting in reds, golds, and oranges, mirroring the temple rooftops and stone pavilions scattered through the mountain paths. Winter, while harsh and cold at higher elevations, transforms the mountain into a hushed world of frost and silence, especially magical when snow dusts the old temple eaves and tree limbs like powdered sugar. Culturally, Mount Mufu has long been a frontier between Confucian lowlands and Taoist Buddhist highlands. The cities and plains that surround the mountain are historically associated with bureaucratic and scholarly traditions, while the mountain itself represents retreat, introspection, and spiritual practice. This dichotomy made the mountain a popular refuge for scholar hermits during the Ming and Qing dynasties, figures who abandoned court life for a quiet existence in the mountains. Many wrote poetry and calligraphy, painted landscapes, and cultivated simple gardens near their huts. Fragments of their stone inscriptions and ruined dwellings still remain, tucked away in forgotten corners of the range, their brushstrokes slowly being reclaimed by moss and vine. The biodiversity of Mount Mufu is also a source of scientific interest. Botanists continue to discover rare plant species in its misty upper valleys, including endemic orchids, alpine azaleas, and medicinal herbs such as rhodiola and Angelica sinensis. Birdwatchers come in search of the elusive golden pheasant, the crested ibis, and flocks of passerines that migrate through the region. Small mammals like the masked palm civet, muntjac deer, and occasionally even black bears can be found within the deeper tracts of forest. Some researchers consider the Mufu Range an ecological corridor between the eastern plains and the more rugged mountain systems of southwestern China, giving it a special place in the larger conservation framework of the country. Access to Mount Mufu today remains limited but improving. While some roads have been extended to reach the lower scenic areas and small villages, most of the mountain's treasures still lie far from paved paths. This inaccessibility, paradoxically, is its protection. A few eco-lodges and rustic guest houses now cater to hikers and spiritual seekers who want to spend days walking among the peaks, bathing in the mountain streams, or meditating beneath ancient cypress trees. But there are no cable cars, no large tour buses, no neon-lit visitor centers here. What remains is something rare, a mountain still lived in and worshipped rather than commodified. In essence, Mount Mufu is a place where the fabric of the earth seems infused with quiet wisdom. Every trail and temple feels like part of a deeper story, a long unfolding tapestry of stone and prayer, of mist and memory. It is a mountain not just to be seen but to be entered with reverence, to be walked slowly, listened to carefully, and remembered long after descending. In its silence, Mount Mufu speaks volumes. Mount Qixia, or Qixiashan, situated just to the northeast of Nanjing in Jiangsu province, is a mountain that has quietly enchanted poets, painters, monks, and travelers for more than 1,000 years. Modest in height but monumental in cultural and natural presence, Qixia offers a vivid intersection of history, seasonal splendor, religious legacy, and artistic inspiration. It is especially revered for its breathtaking display of autumn foliage, which bathes the slopes in a kaleidoscope of crimson, gold, and fiery orange. But beyond its seasonal beauty, the mountain carries an almost sacred stillness, born of centuries of Buddhist presence and countless human stories etched into its stones and trees. Mount Qixia rises gently from the surrounding Nanjing Basin, its ridges spreading like quiet fingers through the woodlands of Jiangsu. The name Qixia translates roughly to abode of rosy clouds, a name said to have originated from the frequent red and golden clouds that hover over the mountain at dawn and dusk, especially in late autumn. This poetic name captures something essential about the mountain's mood. It is a place of quiet transcendence, where nature and spirituality blend seamlessly, and where every step feels tethered to deeper traditions. At the heart of Mount Qixia's cultural significance lies Qixia Temple, a sprawling Buddhist complex nestled against the central slopes. Originally built during the Southern Qi dynasty, 479 to 502 CE, the temple has undergone numerous reconstructions and expansions over the centuries, especially during the Tang, Ming, and Qing periods. Unlike more famous temples that draw large crowds or are marked by grand architectural flourishes, Qixia Temple is notable for its atmospheric elegance. Tiled rooftops draped in moss, ancient cypress trees lining stone pathways, and incense smoke drifting up through the forest canopy. The temple complex includes multiple halls, pagodas, stone carvings, and secluded meditation courtyards. One of its treasures is the Thousand Buddha Cliff, an impressive stretch of rock face carved with hundreds of small Buddhist statues and bas-reliefs. Dating back to the southern dynasties, these carvings reflect a mix of Indian and Chinese artistic styles, illustrating the early transmission of Mahayana Buddhism into the lower Yangtze region. Though many figures have been weathered by time and erosion, the artistry remains clear, and the quiet reverence of the site makes it one of the most spiritually charged areas on the mountain. Autumn at Mount Qixia is nothing short of legendary. From late October through November, the mountain's maples, ginkgos, and sweet gum trees erupt in waves of vibrant color. The landscape transforms into a painter's dreamscape, paths layered with golden leaves, forest corridors turned into fiery tunnels of red, and distant peaks glowing like embers under a crisp blue sky. This phenomenon draws crowds from Nanjing and beyond, yet the mountain still manages to preserve a sense of intimacy. Rather than being confined to one viewpoint, the autumnal colors are spread throughout the mountain, encouraging slow, meandering walks that uncover one pocket of beauty after another. One of the most iconic walks is the Maple Valley Trail, which winds through a lower valley thick with ancient maple trees. In peak season, the trail becomes a living canvas of orange and vermilion, with leaves falling like confetti onto the worn stone path. At the height of leaf season, monks at Qixia Temple sometimes conduct open-air rituals, their chants echoing softly through the trees, enhancing the mountain's already meditative quality. Qixia's allure isn't limited to autumn. In spring, the mountain bursts into life with cherry blossoms, magnolias, and peonies, particularly around the temple precincts and quiet hillsides. Wild camellias and orchids bloom beneath pine and fir trees, offering subtle color beneath the forest green. In summer, the shade of the tall canopy and the murmuring of mountain streams provide a welcome escape from the heat of Nanjing, while the rains drape the mountain in mist and deepen the greens of the forest. Even in winter, when the trees are bare and the temple roofs dusted in frost, Qixia has a subdued, serene elegance, a place where contemplation seems etched into the landscape itself. Beyond its religious and seasonal beauty, Qixia has long been a cradle of art and scholarship. Many Tang and Song dynasty poets, painters, and calligraphers visited or resided here, drawing inspiration from the mountain's scenery and spiritual quiet. Some chose to become monks, giving up court life in favor of silent reflection and painting scrolls of the mountain under moonlight. Their legacy survives in old stele inscriptions, stone tablets bearing classical poems, and preserved artworks. In Nanjing museums, in particular, the mountain was a favored subject of literati painting during the Ming and Qing periods. Artists would often travel to Qixia to sketch its temples, trees, and streams before returning to their studios to produce dreamy ink landscapes infused with spiritual symbolism. These scrolls, many now held in national museums, depict Mount Qixia not as a literal place but as a meditative ideal, a symbol of harmony, impermanence, and the fleeting beauty of nature. Modern visitors still echo these ancient sentiments. Although Qixia is close to Nanjing's bustling urban center, it feels worlds apart. Walking through the forested trails, hearing the low gong of a temple bell, or watching sunlight pierce through the canopy onto mossy stones evokes a sense of timelessness. It's no surprise that many local residents, including students, retirees, and monks, come here not just to sightsee but to breathe, reflect, and recharge. In addition to its cultural and spiritual offerings, Mount Qixia also plays a modest ecological role. While not as remote or biodiverse as China's larger mountain systems, it still supports a healthy mix of flora and fauna, especially in the more secluded forest pockets. Squirrels, wild hares, and a wide variety of birds, including magpies, kingfishers, and the occasional eagle, can be spotted along the quieter trails. Seasonal mushrooms, medicinal herbs, and edible roots are also harvested in small quantities by local herbalists and traditional practitioners, maintaining a subtle link between the mountain's ecosystem and human livelihood. Conservation efforts have ensured that Qixia remains largely protected, with restrictions on commercial development and careful maintenance of walking paths and temple structures. While autumn weekends can bring crowds, weekday mornings and off-season visits still offer ample solitude. The mountain is now connected by a well-planned system of trails, rest stops, and historical markers that enhance the visitor experience without overwhelming the landscape. Ultimately, Mount Qixia is not defined by altitude or grandeur, but by atmosphere. It is a place of rhythm and transition, between seasons, between noise and silence, between the earthly and the transcendent. Whether one comes to admire the fall foliage, trace the calligraphy of ancient monks, or simply walk beneath rustling leaves and temple eaves, Qixia offers a kind of beauty that is quietly powerful, profoundly human, and impossible to forget. Mount Qianjing, or Qianjingshan, rises from the transitional borderlands of eastern Gansu province like a weathered sentinel between China's central plains and the dry, vast grasslands of the northern steppe. It is a place defined not by dramatic peaks or lush foliage, but by the stark poetry of its geology: bleached cliffs, fluted ravines, wind-swept ridges, and the enduring echo of sacred voices carved into stone. Often overlooked in favor of Gansu's more famous mountain ranges or the sprawling dunes of the Heshi Corridor, Qianjingshan holds a rare and haunting beauty. It is a place where time seems to hang suspended in the contours of its eroded valleys and the faded pigments of ancient Buddhist murals. Geographically, Qianjingshan is located near Wuwei, a historically significant city that once served as a key outpost along the Silk Road. This strategic positioning made the mountain a natural site for religious activity, particularly Buddhism, which spread eastward from India and Central Asia during the early centuries of the Common Era. Mount Qianjing sits at the edge of the Lurs Plateau, where the fertile yellow soil begins to yield to the rockier, arid terrain of Gansu's desert fringe. Here, the land undulates in great waves of Lurs and stone, with cliffs carved by centuries of wind and rain into jagged spines and gullied escarpments. The region has little vegetation beyond tough shrubs and hardy grasses, giving it a sparse but powerful presence under the shifting Gansu sky. What draws scholars, pilgrims, and the historically curious to Qianjingshan is not only its landscape, but the Qianjing Grottos, a complex of Buddhist cave shrines carved directly into the mountain's cliff faces. These grottos, though lesser known than those of Dunhuang or Meijishan, are a crucial chapter in the story of Buddhism in northern China. The grottos date back to the northern Liang dynasty, circa 400 CE, and were later expanded during the northern Wei and Sui Tang periods, reflecting the region's long-standing importance as a religious and cultural corridor. The grottos are modest in scale compared to Moguro, but their historical value is immense. They serve as some of the earliest surviving examples of Buddhist art in the region. Within these dusty cliffside chambers, visitors can still find remnants of ancient frescoes, painted with mineral pigments on plastered Lurs. These paintings depict Buddhas, bodhisattvas, monks, apsaras, and swirling mandalas, often with inscriptions in early Chinese script that reflect both religious devotion and artistic experimentation. Some of the caves also feature rock-cut statues, although many have suffered from centuries of erosion, theft, and neglect. One particularly fascinating aspect of the Qianjing grottos is their stylistic diversity. The art found here blends Central Asian influences, traces of Gandharan and Kushan styles, with early Chinese Buddhist aesthetics, showing how ideas and iconography traveled along the Silk Road and were gradually absorbed into the cultural fabric of China. The faces of some bodhisattvas carry a hint of Indian classical features, while others exhibit more cynicized expressions, suggesting a transitional phase in religious representation. The location of these grottos, perched precariously on exposed cliffs, speaks to the spiritual ambition of those who carved them. They were designed to bring practitioners closer to enlightenment, both physically, by ascending the mountain, and symbolically, through contemplation of sacred images above the mundane world. Even today, reaching the grottos requires effort. The paths are narrow and weather-worn, and the wind that whistles through the ravines adds a somber soundtrack to the journey. But this sense of pilgrimage only deepens the impact of the destination. To stand before a 1,500-year-old fresco, faded but still vivid in parts, is to feel the weight of centuries compress into a moment. Surrounding the grottos, Mount Qianjing itself offers a kind of natural austerity that complements its spiritual legacy. The cliffs are heavily eroded, fluted into vertical fins and terraced folds by millennia of wind and water. During sunrise and sunset, these surfaces catch the light in dramatic fashion, turning the rock walls into golden and russet tapestries of texture and shadow. From the ridgelines, one can see across a wide expanse of open steppe, the terrain falling away into a mixture of farmland, dry riverbeds, and ancient caravan routes that once carried goods, languages, and religions across the vastness of Central Asia. Despite its profound historical and cultural significance, Mount Qianjing remains relatively unknown outside specialist circles. This is partly due to its remote location, but also because its preservation has faced challenges. For decades, the grottos received little protection, and some suffered from damage due to both natural weathering and human interference. However, recent years have seen a resurgence of interest in the site. Local cultural bureaus and academic institutions have begun efforts to catalogue and preserve the surviving art and architecture. Digital scanning projects and comparative studies with other Silk Road sites have helped raise awareness of Qianjing's importance in the larger mosaic of Buddhist history. The surrounding region also offers a glimpse into the daily life of communities living at the edge of desert and steppe. Small villages dot the foothills, where residents practice dryland farming, raising sheep and goats, and cultivating millet and hardy vegetables. Traditional cave dwellings, dug into the Lurs hillsides for insulation against extreme weather, are still in use. The cultural identity of this area reflects a blend of Han Chinese, Hui Muslim, and other ethnic traditions, shaped by centuries of trade, migration, and coexistence. Local festivals often feature performances of shadow puppetry and ancient folk songs, many of which echo the rhythms and tales of older, pre-modern times. For modern travelers with an eye for the unreal and the overlooked, Mount Qianjing offers a deeply rewarding experience. It's not a destination of easy beauty, but one of layered meaning and austere charm. The eroded cliffs, whispering wind, ancient paintings, and timeless vistas all conspire to transport the visitor into a different rhythm. A rhythm in which the border between heaven and earth, the sacred and the secular, seems blurred and permeable. There is a solemn dignity to this mountain, a reminder that some of the most powerful places are not those of spectacle and grandeur, but those that stand quietly, bearing witness to centuries of devotion, erosion, and unspoken longing. Mount Qianjing is not merely a site on a map, it is a threshold, between civilizations, between spiritual epochs, and between the permanence of stone and the impermanence of all things. Mount Wuliang, or Wuliangshan, meaning infinite mountain, is not merely a landscape of peaks and forests. It is a realm where the history of tea, biodiversity, and mountain mysticism converge in deeply woven harmony. Located in southwestern Yunnan province, straddling the fertile valleys of the Lancang River, the Upper Mekong, Mount Wuliang rises as a vast, heavily forested massif that stretches through Dali and Piyue prefectures, serving as a crucial ecological corridor and cultural sanctuary. Though lesser known compared to its sibling ranges like Tsongshan or Ailao, Wuliangshan possesses a wild, enigmatic allure. An unreal place where age-old tea trees whisper stories through mist-laden forests and where trails disappear into emerald depths. Wuliangshan is part of the Hengduan Mountains, a massive uplifted system that forms the eastern edge of the Tibetan Plateau and runs through the heart of Yunnan. Here, vertical relief is extreme. River valleys plunge steeply while ridgelines tower above in parallel folds. The Lancang River, known globally as the Mekong, cuts through the mountain base, its waters tumbling and winding through gorges and cliffs, nourishing both wildlife and centuries-old villages along its banks. The climate of the region, moist, monsoonal, and rich in cloud cover, creates the perfect conditions for subtropical and montane cloud forests, making Wuliangshan a biodiversity hotspot. One of the most defining features of Wuliang is its role as a cradle of wild tea cultivation. The mountain's lower and middle slopes are home to ancient Camellia sinensis var. Assamica trees, some of which are hundreds of years old, rooted deep into limestone outcrops and red soil. These wild tea trees are not orderly rows of plantation crops, but towering, broad-leaved giants scattered across the forest, living in symbiosis with ferns, orchids, mosses, and cloud drifts. In some cases, these trees reach heights of over 10 meters. Many of them are semi-wild, having been lightly tended by local ethnic minorities for generations without being domesticated in the conventional sense. The mountain is an important part of the 6 great ancient tea mountains, although it lies somewhat south of the original 6. Nonetheless, Wuliang is a key node in the ancient tea horse road network, the legendary trade route that once connected Yunnan to Tibet and beyond. Tea from Wuliang was traded for horses, salt, and goods, carried by mule caravans across perilous mountain passes. Today, tea from this region, especially pu'er tea, is among the most sought after by connoisseurs, especially when harvested from the old-growth trees, or gushu, which are prized for their complex flavors, mineral richness, and deep, earthy qi. The people who inhabit the slopes of Wuliang are as diverse as its flora. Various ethnic minorities, including the Dai, Yi, Lahu, Wuliang, and Hani, have lived in these mountains for centuries, each developing unique relationships with the land and tea. Their villages are often located in high-altitude clearings or along narrow trails that curve with the contours of the terrain. Their traditional houses, built with bamboo, wood, and earth, overlook terraced fields and forest paths. In these communities, tea is more than a crop, it is a sacred companion, part of marriage rituals, ancestor worship, and daily sustenance. Many still follow eco-spiritual traditions, believing the mountain to be inhabited by protective spirits and guardian forces. One of the most visually surreal aspects of Wuliang is its mist-covered canopies. The forest here often lies under silvery shroud, especially in early morning and late afternoon. Tree trunks drip with condensation, and shafts of sunlight filter down like golden spears through the fog. Walking through the high-altitude forests, you're enveloped in the scent of wet leaves, wild citrus, and distant wood smoke. Trails, used for centuries by tea gatherers and monks, wind unpredictably, revealing sudden vistas of plunging valleys, stone outcrops veiled in vines, and waterfalls hidden in ravines. The fauna of Wuliang is no less remarkable. The area is home to over 200 species of birds, including rare hornbills, laughing thrushes, and tree creepers. Mammals such as clouded leopards, gibbons, civets, and muntjacs roam these forests. Insects flourish here, and so do orchids, some endemic to the region. Ecologists have described Wuliang as a living ark, a forested stronghold that has preserved genetic diversity for countless generations. The biodiversity has drawn increasing attention from conservationists, as pressures from development and tea commercialization threaten to fragment habitats. Despite its ecological richness, parts of Wuliang remain surprisingly untouched by mass tourism. This is largely due to its difficult terrain and remoteness, with few paved roads and long distances between villages. However, in recent years, interest in ecotourism and cultural preservation has led to a cautious opening of the area. Some villages have begun to host homestays where visitors can experience traditional tea harvesting, learn to roast tea leaves over wood fires, and walk ancient caravan paths with local guides. Buddhist and Taoist shrines, though modest, are nestled into forest alcoves and cave openings, often decorated with red cloth, incense sticks, and stone carvings worn smooth by time. One iconic section of Wuliang is the Wuliang Nature Reserve, which protects a large swath of the mountain's higher altitudes and serves as a vital conservation area. It is here that researchers have documented several endemic species of flora and fauna, and efforts are ongoing to study the ancient tea tree gene pool for sustainable propagation. Trekking through this reserve offers visitors a glimpse into a world that feels primeval, untamed, fragrant with moss and leaf litter, and eerily silent but for birdsong and wind. But above all, Wuliang is a place of quiet majesty. It's not the kind of unreal place that stuns with sheer cliffs or luminous lakes. Instead, its surrealism lies in its organic harmony, the way human history, biodiversity, and landscape have entwined so seamlessly. It is a mountain of subtle textures and spiritual resonance, where you might find a gnarled tea tree older than any local temple, or step onto a ridge where cloud banks roll across the horizon like the sea. To walk in Wuliang is to experience China's deep interior, not just geographically, but spiritually and ecologically. It is a mountain that holds memory in its soil, aroma in its trees, and wisdom in its silence. For those willing to explore its trails and steep forested folds, it offers a profound encounter with an older, slower, and infinitely richer world. Mount Batai, known in Chinese as Batatian, lies nestled in the vast and dramatic landscape where the lush lowlands of the Sichuan Basin begin to rise and transform into the wild, windswept altitudes of the Tibetan Plateau. It's a mountain that doesn't assert its fame through sheer elevation or popular tourism, but instead earns its mystique through remoteness, elemental grandeur, and its location at a geological and cultural frontier. In this transitional region, the mountain forms a cloud-wreathed massif, a realm where Tibetan prayer flags flutter alongside Sichuanese pine groves, and where the sky often feels just a step away. The exact location of Mount Batai falls in the western edge of Sichuan province, possibly within or near the Gars Tibetan Autonomous Prefecture, Ganzi. This rugged area is characterized by deep-cut valleys, glaciated ridges, and a blend of ecosystems that change rapidly with altitude. Batatian doesn't have the notoriety of peaks like Minya Konka or Yading, but it possesses something rarer: silence, isolation, and the haunting atmosphere of untouched wilderness. It's the kind of place where nature still dictates the rules, where cloud banks can swallow an entire ridge in minutes, and narrow trails vanish beneath creeping mists. Geologically, Mount Batai sits at the seam where the Eurasian plate has collided with the Indian plate, the very same tectonic friction that has uplifted the Himalayas and formed the Greater Tibetan Plateau. This movement has created a jumbled, violently folded topography: sharp ridges, stratified cliffs, and broken stone fields littered with glacial debris. The rock of Mount Batai consists largely of metamorphic schist, granite intrusions, and ancient sedimentary layers twisted over millions of years. Its slopes often shimmer with veins of quartz or are littered with craggy boulders polished by centuries of wind and snow. One of the most distinct characteristics of Batai is its climatic volatility. The weather here is profoundly dynamic, a meeting point of humid air currents from the east and dry, cold winds from the plateau. As a result, the mountain is frequently wrapped in clouds, giving it the nickname among locals as the sea roof or sky altar. Fog and mist are almost constant companions, particularly in the early morning and late afternoon. The light, filtered through this vaporous veil, gives the landscape a soft, ghostly hue. Trees become silhouettes, valleys seem to float, and the peaks emerge like islands in an ethereal ocean. The ecology of Mount Batai reflects this convergence zone. Its lower slopes support dense forests of Sichuan fir, hemlock, rhododendron, spruce, and birch, often cloaked in moss and epiphytes. These forests are rich in medicinal plants, mushrooms, and a host of endemic species. Wildlife here is elusive but remarkable: musk deer, tarkeen, Himalayan black bears, golden pheasants, and perhaps even snow leopards in the highest reaches. Birdsong echoes through the valleys, interrupted only by the rustle of wind through trees or the distant crack of thunder rolling across the basin. As one ascends Batai, the forest gives way to alpine meadows, where tundra grasses, dwarf shrubs, and wildflowers, such as blue poppies and gentians, form delicate tapestries in summer. In spring, rhododendron blooms cover entire hillsides, transforming the grey-green mountain into a pastel dreamscape. In autumn, the highlands blaze with red and gold, while the evergreens stand dark like sentinels. And in winter, snow falls thick and deep, transforming Batai into a frozen realm that few dare to explore. While the mountain is largely devoid of modern infrastructure or urban influence, it has long been a sacred space for Tibetan pilgrims and hermits. Small Buddhist shrines, often just a few stone piles or prayer wheels turning in the wind, dot secluded trails. One may find a lone chorten, stupa, wrapped in colored flags, or hear the echo of a horn carried up from a monastery hidden in the folds of the valley below. Prayer flags flutter from crags and passes, their ink faded from sun and snow, inscribed with mantras meant to protect the land, bless the animals, and grant safe passage through this world and into the next. The cultural landscape of Batai is just as layered as its geography. On its eastern flanks, you may find Han Chinese settlements where traditional Sichuan architecture, whitewashed walls, upturned eaves, and tiled roofs still survive. Here, farmers grow buckwheat and tend goats on terraced fields. On the western approaches, the influence turns Tibetan, with yak herders, tent-dwelling nomads, and stone-built villages that cling to cliffsides or nestle into wind-protected gullies. Life here is slow, seasonal, and profoundly shaped by the mountain's moods. The calendar follows not clocks, but clouds, snowmelt, and stars. Because of its remoteness, Mount Batai is rarely seen by mainstream tourists. It is, for the most part, a mountain for the solitary, for those who seek communion with raw nature rather than spectacle. Trekking here is an act of endurance. Trails are narrow and often unmarked, carved by shepherds or wildlife, winding through gullies and ridges with little signage or support. But for those willing to enter its domain, the reward is unmatched. Complete immersion in silence, the feel of soft moss beneath your boots, the sight of clouds breaking over a distant peak, and the sound of wind whispering through an ancient forest. In recent years, small efforts have been made to document and protect the natural and cultural heritage of the Batai region. Conservationists are concerned that as road construction reaches deeper into the west of Sichuan, ecosystems like Batai's may be vulnerable to logging, mining, or poorly managed tourism. There is hope, however, that Batai's very inaccessibility may preserve it a while longer. Increasingly, ecotourism models involving local Tibetan and Yi communities are being explored, offering homestays, guided hikes, and cultural experiences that benefit the people who have called this mountain home for generations. Mount Batai, in its quiet isolation, may not be the most photographed mountain in China, but it is undeniably one of the most unreal. It is a place where earth, sky, and spirit seem to blend, where nature dominates not with force, but with presence, and where the ancient rhythms of highland life continue almost unchanged. It is a mountain that guards its secrets beneath layers of mist and memory, waiting for the rare traveler who seeks not only altitude, but depth. Mount Jiulong, or Wuliang, meaning Nine-Dragon Mountain, rests in the rolling and humid landscapes of Zhejiang province, a region in eastern China famous for its lush green hills, watery rice terraces, and deeply entrenched cultural heritage. Wuliang is not one of China's tallest peaks, nor is it a national household name like Huangshan or Amei, but it holds its own unique enchantment, particularly for those seeking a more intimate communion with nature, history, and tradition. This mountain, named after the imagined twisting of 9 dragon-shaped ridgelines, is a microcosm of subtropical beauty, covered in cascading waterfalls, thick canopies of ancient trees, and footpaths paved with centuries-old stone slabs. A tranquil realm where time moves more slowly and the landscape tells quiet stories of both natural wonder and human devotion. Set amidst the wet and temperate climate of Zhejiang, Wuliang is a region where rainfall is frequent, mists are common, and the air carries the crisp fragrance of pine, loam, and wet stone. The topography is undulating rather than towering, with interconnected ridges, narrow gullies, and gently sloping valleys that allow rainwater to stream from the highlands into rivers and irrigation canals below. These hydrological features give the mountain its defining character, a haven of waterfalls. The mountain is laced with a network of crystal-clear streams, many of which tumble over smooth granite boulders and fan out into delicate sheets, curtains, and ribbons as they cascade down the hillsides. Among the most famous of these waterfalls is the Jiulong Waterfall Group, a series of tiered cascades that drop through a forested ravine with meditative grace. These falls vary in size and intensity. Some thunder down into jade-colored pools with the roar of 1,000 drums, while others trickle delicately over mossy stones into tranquil basins that reflect the overhanging bamboo and camphor branches above. The main waterfall, known as Longtan Waterfall, plunges dramatically from a height of over 30 meters, carving a natural amphitheater into the rock and sending a fine mist into the canopy, a mist that often refracts morning light into fleeting rainbows. Walking through Wuliang means walking through history. The mountain is covered in an intricate maze of ancient stone walkways, some of which are believed to date back to the Tang and Song dynasties, or even earlier. These paths, constructed from hand-cut granite slabs and laid in careful patterns, were originally used by pilgrims, monks, and traders traveling between villages and temples nestled in the hills. Over centuries of footsteps, the stones have been polished smooth, and in some places, they are grooved by the steady wear of cartwheels or rain channels carved to prevent erosion. These walkways don't simply lead to scenic views, they connect to sacred sites and hermitages built deep within the forest. Scattered across Wuliang are small Taoist and Buddhist shrines, many of them obscured by trees or hidden in rock niches. One such site, the Nine-Dragon Temple, Julongsi, is modest in scale but rich in atmosphere. Tucked into a quiet glade and flanked by ancient cedar trees, The temple complex offers incense-scented serenity, its walls etched with faded calligraphy, and its wooden eaves echoing the drip of water from overhanging cliffs. Monks and caretakers still tend to these places, offering prayers and tea to visitors in a manner unchanged for generations. The flora of Wuliang is profoundly diverse. Thanks to the mountain's mild climate and abundant rainfall, it supports an ecological richness that rivals some of the more famous nature reserves in southern China. The lower slopes are thick with bamboo groves, sweet-scented osmanthus, Chinese tun trees, and cinnamons, while higher elevations host camphor, oak, and ginkgo trees, some of which are hundreds of years old. In the undergrowth, one finds ferns, wild ginger, and medicinal herbs used for generations in traditional Chinese medicine. Springtime sees an explosion of wild azaleas, magnolias, and peach blossoms, while autumn cloaks the forest in amber and crimson tones, transforming the trail into a living corridor of fire-hued foliage. Wildlife, too, finds sanctuary in Wuliang's secluded hollows. Birds like the crested goshawk, black bulbul, and Chinese bamboo partridge flit through the canopy, their songs mingling with the sound of water. In the more undisturbed parts of the forest, one might find masked civets, muntjac deer, or even the elusive Chinese pangolin, though these creatures are rarely seen and typically retreat at the slightest intrusion. Butterflies, especially swallowtails and glasswings, flock around flowering shrubs in warmer months, adding delicate movement to the green hush of the woods. But perhaps what makes Wuliang most unreal is its sense of perpetual discovery. Unlike many famous mountains where tourism has built up and trails are clearly defined, Wuliang maintains a quiet sense of mystery. There are side paths that vanish into overgrown thickets, stone bridges lost to vines, and abandoned pavilions covered in moss and silence. Locals speak of hermit scholars who once lived here in seclusion, painting misty landscapes with brush and ink inspired by the very views still visible today. Indeed, Wuliang scenery has often been cited in traditional shanshui, mountain water, painting, its curving ridges, veiled waterfalls, and clustered trees forming the quintessential Chinese landscape that poets and artists have sought to immortalize for centuries. Though the mountain remains relatively undervisited by mass tourism, some efforts have been made in recent years to develop eco-friendly infrastructure, including wooden walkways, stone stairs with handrails, and interpretive signs in both Chinese and English. These additions aim to guide visitors gently through the terrain without disturbing the ecological balance or the mountain's mystical aura. Nearby village guesthouses and tea farms have started offering stays that incorporate local cuisine, mountain hikes, and cultural storytelling, blending hospitality with heritage preservation. At dusk, Wuliang takes on an almost dreamlike quality. As the sun filters low through the trees and the cicadas begin to sing, the waterfalls sparkle gold, and the walkways seem to lead not just through forest, but through time. The mists thicken once more, cloaking the world in white and green, and the mountain whispers the same quiet truths it has murmured for 1,000 years. Truths that can only be heard by those who slow down, listen, and walk with care. Mount Wuliang is not just a mountain of physical beauty, but a living relic, a mountain written in stone, water, and foliage, where China's ancient past and unspoiled nature still exist side by side. It remains one of the most unreal and serene places in the country, a sanctuary for the soul and a path through the fog towards something ancient, sacred, and deeply peaceful. Mount Leipo, or Leiposhan, is a lesser-known but visually striking karst mountain nestled in the remote heart of Guangxi Zhuang Autonomous Region, a land famed for its surreal limestone topography, mist-veiled river valleys, and mosaic of indigenous cultures. While places like Guilin and Yangshior have become iconic for their postcard-worthy karst formations, Leiposhan offers a quieter, more authentic version of that same geological spectacle, one unfiltered by crowds or commercialization. It is a place where vertical cliffs and razor-sharp ridges rise abruptly from thick jungle, where caves descend into mysterious darkness, and where traditional Zhuang minority villages cling to the slopes, carrying on ways of life largely unchanged for centuries. The name Leipo loosely translates to thunder slope, evoking both the dramatic landscape and the frequent summer storms that roll through the area, cracking the sky with sound and casting flickers of light across the jagged rock formations. The mountain is part of a wider karst zone, characterized by limestone pinnacles, collapsed sinkholes, and cave systems formed over millions of years through water erosion. Unlike other mountainous regions where peaks gradually slope upward, Leiposhan's terrain is abrupt and theatrical. Its cliffs shoot up in sheer walls, often striped with mineral streaks and crowned with stubby vegetation. From a distance, the formations resemble a forest of stone spires, silent, immobile sentinels wrapped in mist and mystery. What makes Lei Poshan particularly unreal is the way nature and human life are interwoven into this vertical wilderness. The Zhuang people, Guangxi's largest ethnic minority, have long called these mountains home. Their stilted wooden homes are often perched on terraces cut into the mountain sides, nestled between stone outcroppings and shaded by bamboo groves. The architecture is traditional but surprisingly adaptive. Homes are built with open frames to allow air circulation, using locally sourced timber and stone, and raised above the ground to protect against floods and wild animals. From these village outposts, one can often hear the sounds of weaving looms, distant gongs, or the soft lilt of folk songs drifting down the slopes. The villages of Lei Poshan are far more than scenic. They are living repositories of Zhuang language, customs, and spiritual beliefs. In these enclaves, it's common to encounter colorful festivals, elaborate embroidered garments, and herbal medicine traditions passed down through generations. Local elders tell stories of mountain spirits residing in the cliffs and caves, and ceremonies are sometimes held to appease these unseen forces. Rituals involving incense, rice wine, and chants in a tongue older than Mandarin itself. From a geological perspective, Lei Poshan is a marvel. The karst formations here are unusually diverse in shape and composition, including knife-edge ridges, sharp limestone cones, needle-thin spires, and natural stone bridges. Many of these features were formed through the chemical weathering of limestone by slightly acidic rainwater, which dissolves calcium carbonate over time, creating fantastical landforms that seem to defy gravity and logic. Some cliffs look like frozen waterfalls of rock, others resemble petrified waves or dragon spines breaking through the forest canopy. Lei Poshan is also home to a network of caves, many of which have never been fully mapped or explored. The most accessible, such as Xianren Dong, Fairy Cave, or Longyang Dong, Dragon Rock Cave, are vast cathedral-like spaces with stalactites shaped like curtains, chandeliers, and organ pipes. Some caves feature subterranean rivers, echoing chambers, and prehistoric fossils. Others are known for the bioluminescent insects that glow like stars in the darkness. These caves often have religious significance, with small shrines or carved stone statues tucked into alcoves, their candlelit faces worn smooth by time. The vegetation on Mount Leipo is another aspect that lends it an air of surrealism. Despite the harshness of the rock, the area supports an abundance of life. Cliffside orchids, wild azaleas, and ferns with silvery fronds cling to narrow crevices, while forests of bamboo, chestnut, and evergreen oak cover the lower elevations. In more secluded areas, one might find rare medicinal herbs, some of which are endemic to this part of Guangxi. The constant moisture in the air, from rainfall, morning dew, and condensation from mist, creates a thriving microclimate ideal for lush plant life, despite the rugged terrain. Wildlife thrives in this vertical ecosystem as well. The forests of Lei Poshan shelter golden pheasants, crested kingfishers, and masked palm civets, along with elusive species like the clouded leopard and Chinese serow, a mountain goat antelope hybrid rarely seen by human eyes. In the evenings, the air fills with the sound of tree frogs, cicadas, and the distant hooting of owls, a nocturnal symphony that blends with the gentle rustling of leaves and the gurgle of mountain springs. Hiking through Lei Poshan is no ordinary trek. It is an immersive experience in terrain both mystical and daunting. Trails often follow the natural contours of the karst, weaving through narrow gullies, across rope bridges, and up carved stone staircases. Some paths were once used by Zhuang traders and pilgrims, linking village to village, shrine to shrine. Along the way, hikers encounter ancient stone cairns, weathered steles with forgotten inscriptions, and stone altars used in animist rituals. More adventurous trails may lead to exposed cliff edges where views stretch out over a maze of peaks, forests, and river valleys below, often covered in morning fog that slowly peels away as the sun rises. One of the more surreal vistas comes at dawn, when the rising sun paints the karst towers in hues of orange and pink, and the clouds settle into the lower valleys like a sea of cotton, leaving the peaks to float like islands in the sky. In this moment, Mount Leipo resembles a dreamscape, a place neither entirely of earth nor of sky, suspended somewhere between the mythic and the real. Efforts have begun to preserve and protect the ecological and cultural integrity of Lei Poshan. As tourism slowly discovers this hidden gem, local initiatives are pushing for sustainable tourism models, including eco-lodges built in traditional style, guided cultural experiences led by Zhuang locals, and strict regulations on cave access to prevent degradation. The hope is to share Lei Poshan's beauty without sacrificing the authenticity that makes it so rare and unreal in the first place. Mount Leipo remains one of Guangxi's best-kept secrets, a mountain that, while modest in fame, rivals any other in China for sheer wonder. It is a place where stone rises like flame from jungle, where the land speaks in limestone riddles, and where ancient traditions flow as deeply as the underground rivers winding through the caves. In every sense, Lei Poshan is not just a mountain, but a living monument to nature's artistry and cultural endurance, a truly unreal place worthy of reverence and quiet awe. Mount Shuangfeng, often referred to as Twin Peaks Mountain, stands like a monumental gate to the heavens, a double-crested icon of symmetry and serenity rising quietly from the misty bamboo sea of Anhui province. The name Shuangfeng translates simply but powerfully, Twin Peaks, and from a distance, the two distinctive summits seem to pierce the sky like a pair of watchful sentinels. Towering in near-perfect balance, these twin ridges have drawn comparisons to yin and yang, embodying the Taoist ideals of duality, harmony, and the subtle power of natural form. Located in a less touristed corridor between the better-known Yellow Mountains, Huangshan, and Zhohua Mountain, Shuangfengshan offers an entirely different experience. One intimate, mystical, and wrapped in clouds and folklore. It is not a mountain that demands or with grandeur. Rather, it seduces with poetry, subtle elegance, and the dense beauty of eastern China's forested heartland. Bamboo groves whisper in the wind, veils of fog drift through the valleys, and old stone paths trace quiet contours of a landscape that seems unchanged for centuries. The two peaks that give Mount Shuangfeng its name, often referred to by locals as East Peak and West Peak, rise close together but offer entirely distinct experiences. The East Peak is more accessible, with stone stairways leading through forests of towering moso bamboo, eventually opening onto terraces with panoramic views of the surrounding ridges and valleys. From here, one can often see the sea of clouds that gathers in the early morning, with the taller West Peak occasionally breaking through the mist like an island in a white ocean. The West Peak, by contrast, is steeper, rockier, and more secluded. Reaching its summit typically involves narrow paths carved into the rock, winding up through scrubby pines and mossy cliffs, with fewer railings and fewer signs of modern intervention. Those who venture here often speak of a spiritual stillness, a silence so deep it feels as if the mountain is holding its breath. At certain points along the trail, weathered stone markers and steles stand half-hidden beneath lichen and moss, indicating that this peak was once part of ancient pilgrimage routes. The mountain's bamboo forests are one of its defining features and a core reason why Shuangfeng is considered an unreal place. These groves are not planted or cultivated. They are ancient, natural forests of wild bamboo, some stalks growing over 15 meters tall, their green crowns swaying gently above winding stone paths. Walking through them is like entering a living cathedral of green light, where the filtered sun flickers through the dense canopy, and every footstep on the leaf-strewn ground sounds like it's being absorbed by the mountain itself. In spring and summer, the bamboo hums with the sound of cicadas, while in autumn, the leaves turn golden and drift softly to the earth, carpeting the trails in light. This dense bamboo environment plays a significant role in the ecology of Mount Shuangfeng, supporting a variety of rare and endemic species. The mountain's mixed habitat, combining temperate broadleaf forest, bamboo groves, and rocky outcrops, is home to golden pheasants, masked civets, sika deer, and an impressive diversity of bird life. The local insect life is especially vibrant, with an array of butterflies, dragonflies, and iridescent beetles flashing in the undergrowth. In the evening, glowworms and fireflies bring the forest to life with delicate flickers of bioluminescence, casting an otherworldly glow on the foliage and stone paths. Mount Shuangfeng is not only a place of nature, it is also a mountain deeply woven into Chinese culture and spiritual tradition. Though it never developed the fame of nearby sacred peaks like Huangshan or Zhohua, it has been cherished by local Taoist and Buddhist communities for centuries. Small shrines dot the mountainside, often carved directly into rock alcoves or tucked beneath natural stone overhangs. Many of these are dedicated to mountain spirits or protective deities, and it's common to find incense sticks, red prayer ribbons, or offerings of fruit and rice left quietly by pilgrims and villagers. The most prominent of these shrines is the Twin Lotus Temple, located on a ridge between the two peaks. The temple is relatively modest, built of weathered stone and dark wood, but the views from its courtyard are sublime, offering a clear line of sight to both peaks in symmetrical profile. Inside, statues of Guanyin and Laozi sit calmly beneath curling eaves, bathed in sunlight filtered through ancient latticework. Local monks and hermits still inhabit this temple, living quietly off the land, tending to small vegetable gardens and practicing calligraphy, meditation, and traditional herbal medicine. For centuries, Mount Shuangfeng has also inspired artists and poets, many of whom found in its quiet elegance a muse for paintings, poems, and philosophy. The mountain's unusual profile, so distinctly twinned, has long served as a metaphor in Chinese literature, symbolizing companionship, balance, and the interplay between strength and gentleness. Ink scrolls from the Ming and Qing dynasties depict the peaks rising above a drifting sea of clouds, bamboo bending in the foreground, and a lone traveler winding along a serpentine path. These images mirror the real experience of visiting Shuangfengshan, a place where landscape, legend, and emotion blend seamlessly into one. Though relatively undiscovered by mass tourism, efforts are now underway to develop Mount Shuangfeng as a protected eco-cultural site. These plans aim to preserve the mountain's natural charm while allowing more people to access its trails and viewpoints. New initiatives are encouraging low-impact tourism, with eco-lodges built in traditional styles, guided treks led by local villagers, and educational programs about the region's ecology, spirituality, and folklore. Importantly, the development is being carefully managed to avoid the pitfalls of over-commercialization that have affected other Chinese mountain sites. What makes Mount Shuangfeng truly unreal is not just its aesthetic perfection or its ecological richness, but the way it embodies an ideal of stillness and duality, a place where time feels slow, where each element of the landscape reflects another, and where human presence seems more whispered than shouted. To stand between the twin peaks, in the hush of the bamboo forest, is to feel the gentle rhythms of an ancient world still pulsing beneath the surface of modern life. It is not merely a mountain to visit, but a sacred mirror of balance, reflection, and quiet majesty. This video is for educational or entertainment purposes only, and information provided in the video may be incorrect. If you enjoyed the video, consider subscribing to the channel and like the video.